the devil wants to kill you. And so when he enslaves you, then he separates you, then he isolates you. You get very much in your head, the guilt, the shame, the frustration, the depression, and then kids end up taking their lives.
Give 5 guys a high five and say thank God you're a man.
Welcome back to another episode of the What is a Man podcast, the #1 Christian men podcast in the world. Today, we have a very, very special guest. We are honored by Dr. Jules Molina, a man uniquely equipped to speak into both mental and spiritual dimensions of this world's crisis. Dr. Molina is a board-certified psychiatrist with the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. He's also a pastor of a local church, bringing decades of clinical experience together with gospel-centered compassion. He's been married for 30 years and is a proud father of 4 beautiful kids and a grandfather now of 2 beautiful grandkids. Please welcome to today's podcast, Dr. Jules Molina.
I'm very excited to be here with you guys, and looking forward to whatever it is that you guys want to ask.
We have too many questions. This might be a 5-hour episode.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what you guys have to ask, and I pray that God gives me a word, and hopefully I can remember, what I need to remember in order to be able to answer your questions.
You got this.
Yeah. So is it Dr. Jules, Pastor Jules, or Pastor Molina, Dr. Molina? What is it that you prefer to go by?
It doesn't matter. The kids, high school kids that we used to go on medical missions with used to call me Dr. J, which I liked because I admired Dr. J a lot. He was big in my era.
Basketball.
Pastor, a lot of people in church call me pastor, obviously. Either way, I'm good with either one. Dr. J,
they're both good titles, right? It doesn't matter to you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Today's podcast is going to dive deep into some of the most silent yet deadly struggles that men face. This is drug abuse, pornography, mental battles, and spiritual burnouts. These aren't just statistics. They're real fights happening in real hearts and mind of men all around the world. So we're going to get into all the things that people are shamed to talk about. They don't want to talk about, what they do in their private time or what they need to do to get by the day.
Yeah, and the devil's killing them in the dark and secret. The devil is doing them in, and they get very into their own mind, and the devil jumps on them, and they start, feeling like hypocrites, like they're not good enough, like they're never gonna make it, and it could become something that is detrimental to their spiritual health, obviously, but also to their physical and mental health.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So getting into it, if you want to give some background on the majority of the, you're a psychiatrist, not psychologist. Very important. You want to insult a psychiatrist fast? Call him a psychologist.
You know what's funny? That I started out as a psychologist. Right?
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
Go.
I was in graduate school for clinical psychology.
Okay.
And I was very interested in clinical psychology, and I was looking forward to one day having my own practice. And, when I was working, I met a group of kids, young kids that were different than the other kids, and they were like in their own world, and it was hard to get through to them. And I saw how the tools of psychiatry was able to kind of get to them in such a way that you can actually have a conversation with them and they would engage with you. And it's a very small percentage. It's less than 5% of the kids. Most of the kids did well with therapy and counseling and resources. But for some reason, that small percentage of kids just tugged at me, and it caused me to leave graduate school, which I was going to become a psychologist. I was a very proud psychologist, and go to medical school so I could one day become a psychiatrist. So, yeah.
For those that don't know, what's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist?
Well, psychologists, they generally focus on techniques and skills to be able to, help people from a therapeutic standpoint by conversational kind of techniques. They also employ testing and other things to be able to, I lean on psychologists a lot still because we have some patients that may be dual diagnosed, which means that they don't only have a mood disorder, but they may have a mood disorder plus a personality disorder. And it's very hard to decipher. And so sometimes you need some pretty comprehensive testing. And so psychologists provide that tool. And, you guys have seen the movies where there's a forensic psychologist who is like trying to give the FBI the portrait or kind of the profile of the serial killer. And so psychologists do that also. And they also work in companies and trying to figure out protocols and procedures to try to make the company work more efficient and help with the morale of the company. So psychologists do a lot of things, but the one thing that they don't do is prescribe medications. And so that's left to psychiatrists. So psychiatrists, we employ different techniques to be able to diagnose people, and we use medications to treat mental illness. And that's kind of our thing, even though we are trained in counseling and therapy and supportive therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, psychoanalytic therapy. But generally, psychiatrists are known because we're able to prescribe what's considered, these high risk or quote unquote dangerous medications. And we're like the experts in that.
Yeah. Well, there's very, very many psychiatrists and there are many pastors, but there are very, very few psychiatrists that are pastors.
Yeah, I don't know any.
And so
I know one. I know one.
You're one of one. And that's why I think it's so incredible to have you on the podcast today, because you've been a pastor longer than you've been a psychiatrist. So you've been a Christian longer than you've been a psychiatrist. You've been a Christian for many, many years, and you're, the bishop's brother, right? The authors of the What Is Man books, brother. So you have the same testimony and background, but you also have the clinical experience. You've worked in the VA now for I don't know how many.
Correct.
So what's your director?
I've been at the VA for over 13 years now, when I was the director of the substance abuse program, but also the whole Broward Clinic. We had like 12 psychiatrists working there, a bunch of psychologists, social workers, and treating a huge panel of veterans for the mental illness. But specifically, I was director over the substance abuse clinic. So I treated veterans that had substance use or addiction disorders. And a lot of these veterans also had mood disorders or anxiety disorders. They also had marital problems, you can imagine. And so, it's been a true joy and a pleasure for me to kind of work with these veterans and help them get their lives turned around because of their service to the country.
Right.
I feel like we owe it to them, that they can enjoy this part of the life now after having sacrificed so much for us. So I've been doing that for 13 years with the VA right now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. So again, you have so many years of experience. So I want to go ahead and I don't want to delay anymore. I want to go ahead and jump into it. But the areas of lives of men that I want to dive into today is number one, pornography, because I don't know what the statistic is, but it's very, I can look it up at what we're discussing. But
it's about 64% of Christian men admitting to regular porn use.
Yeah, regular porn use. But then if you go into how many have used or looked at porn in the last 3 months, it skyrockets like almost like 90%. It's crazy, right? How prevalent pornography is, and that you can even get into the idea of what is pornography? Is it just like a naked girl, or is it deep pornography usage? So I want to get into that. I want to get into substance abuse, and then I want to get into spiritual and mental wellness, right? Because pretty much if you go back to 30, 40 years ago, there's no such thing as mental illness. It's a demon, right?
Right.
So we want to dive into, okay, well, what is that in your eyes? How do you see that? So we'll start off with pornography. And so the first question I have is, sadly, because there's phones everywhere now and every kid has one, it's fairly new that it's so easily accessible. So people are starting to watch pornography earlier and earlier nowadays, more than usual, more than it used to be. So have you seen in your experience like real long-term effects of pornography of use? And
yeah, absolutely. I used to work with a school, and we were talking to them about sex and sexual addictions and that kind of stuff. And so I did some research on that, and it turns out that Europe precedes us by like 20 or 30 years. So what we're going through today, Europe already went through 20, 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things that they saw in Europe, since they're more open and more liberal society culture, they didn't put any boundaries or barriers to pornography for adolescents. And it wasn't long before the whole European Union had to get together and make the declaration that they were losing their young people. Young people as young as 12, 13, 14 years old were getting not only into pornography, but into, what they would call like alternative pornography, violent pornography, aggressive pornography.
Oh, wow.
And so the European Union actually, they started making changes to create barriers for young people to access pornography because of the catastrophic effects to the young people. And they describe these young people, this generation that they kind of lost to pornography as social anorexics.
Hmm.
And what they meant by that was like these young people had no skills and no tools and no abilities to interact in the real world with regular adults, regular people. But instead, they kind of stayed behind closed doors in secret, in front of the computers, in front of their devices, and weren't engaging in the real world, and were kind of like developmentally delayed as far as going into young adulthood and becoming functional, working, healthy adults
Yeah.
because of how pornography had captured that generation. And so now with social media, not only the pornography part, but now with social media in general, especially with pornography, there's a real danger in every single home in this country, Christian or not Christian, pastors' homes, good, honest, solid Christian homes, where the devil could come in through pornography, through the computer, through the phones, and capture the kid's heart and bring destruction to their children and therefore to their homes. So yeah, it's a real problem. And the fact that you're Christian does not immunize you against it.
Yeah.
You're as vulnerable as somebody that's not Christian. In fact, you might be more vulnerable to it because you're a target for the devil.
Right.
Your family's a target for the devil. So there's a lot of great software now, thankfully, and there's different things you can install on your kids' computer and your kids' phones to kind of be able to track, what sites they're visiting and that kind of stuff. So you're able to control that a little bit.
Right.
But how about the Christian adults? Like you guys were talking about the men in the church, the dads, the husbands.
Yeah. You said a couple interesting things there. One is I've seen that there's a lot of, the birth rates are in decline, and you have a lot of different issues that exactly what you're saying. People are not going out nowadays to go meet new people. They rather just stay online, right? And they rather meet people online. And whenever they have the urge to fulfill something physically, they'll go straight to the porn sites, and there's no need to go out.
Japan is definitely one of those.
Yeah.
They have a declining birth rate.
Because, with anime.
Because of that.
I can't imagine.
Right. Exactly.
Nothing good can come out of watching anime, but that's a big part of it. So, so the question is, what have you, in your experience, what has been like the strong impacts of men that have grown up with a strong pornography tie when they enter into marriage, right? Because I don't know about you, but I can imagine some Christian things like, once I have my wife, I don't need to believe myself because now I have my wife to do that for me.
Yeah, so, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It's not that easy. It's not that black and white.
Babe, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
No, I'm tired. I had the kid for 13 hours today. I'm going to bed.
You guys, I mean, you know what the number one cause of erectile dysfunction is in men that are otherwise healthy men? Is pornography.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine they're just desensitized. Yeah.
So they create an illusion or a delusion, right? They create an image of what the sexual act or the process or the feeling or the sense should be like or whatever through their pornographic experience on the computers and so when they get into the real life sexual act with their wife, they're not able to perform. They're not able to get it up because it's just not getting to them, affecting them, or arousing them to the level of their pornographic experience.
Wow.
Right.
So they're not able to perform.
Yeah. And when you're
in
a
real
kid,
life.
you would never think that would ever be an issue, right?
Exactly.
When you're a young guy, you think that
Exactly.
you're bulletproof, or you'll never decline.
Yeah.
But when after a couple of years with your wife, and you're used to seeing a couple of women every time you wanted to do something.
And I've had this discussion with Christian men before, and you should see their face when I tell them that, because they're like, "Oh yeah, that kind of hits home." Like that's why, and they finally start connecting the dots that pornographic experience, that fantasy life that they're living, that false narrative that they're indulging in, is impacting their real life relationship with their wife.
Yeah.
And it's not about Viagra, and it's not about getting the little blue pill or whatever. It's about their giving themselves over to pornography is literally impacting their life in a very real way.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that really catches their attention the most out of everything you could tell them. You could talk about the spiritual impact. You could talk about the devil destroying their home. You could talk about all that, whatever. But when you tell them the reason you're not able to perform with your wife is because of your fantasy life, then they start connecting the dots.
Is there like a bulb that?
Yes.
Ding, oh.
Yes.
And then they cut it out.
Yes. Because obviously they want to perform with the wives and they want to have a healthy marriage, and that's their heart, that's their intent. but they're just not able to. And they could never imagine, because it used to be said that if you engage in pornography, it will heighten your sexual experience with your wife. That was what they used to say many, many years ago.
Yeah.
But now we've realized that that's not a reality. It's the contrary. And so,
Yeah, that's what's so sad about it, is that it's taught that it's healthy. It's
Yeah.
healthy to engage in it.
Right.
You're supposed to go out and find out what you enjoy, so that,
Yeah.
I don't know what they say is the benefits of it, but what is the medical treatment for these people that they find themselves, okay, yeah, I unfortunately became hooked on pornography when I was a very young age. What is, now that they're adults and they're trying to seek help medically, what is it?
It's and this is a controversy, right? So it is an addiction, like any addiction. And how do you know that? Because it's hijacking the very centers of the brain that involve reinforcement and reinforcing behavior as drugs. So pornography becomes their dopamine high, where other people may use cocaine to get that dopamine high, where other people may use opioids to get that dopamine high. But pornography becomes that dopamine high. So if you understand physiologically what's going on, then you kind of approach it almost like if you were approaching any other addiction, right? So you want to stop reinforcing those pathways.
Yeah.
And so there has to be a change of behavior.
Yeah.
There has to be a change of behavior, because as long as you're reinforcing those pathways, the behavior is going to continue to be reinforced.
Right.
And so it may continue. So the first thing is to stop. And easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it was that easy, he would do it.
Exactly. The
Spray
first-
bottle.
Yeah.
Taste.
And so we talk about removing the temptation. So, for example, for like an alcoholic, that they're stuck, one of the first things we do is like we, maybe we'll take the car keys from them so they can't drive to the liquor store. So very practical things that the family could do to stop, or intervene or be an impediment, put speed bumps in between the person and that behavior.
Right.
And some pornography, get rid of the computers, get rid of the laptops. I have one patient one time that was addicted to pornography and it was destroying his marriage. And I noted something. He was a prominent professor at a university. And I told him, let me ask you something. So this guy would get up in the morning with a cup of coffee and do pornography. To him, it was like having a bagel.
Just starting the day.
It's incredible.
Starting the day. And so his narrative was he was addicted to it and he couldn't stop.
Right.
And so I said, well, when you go to the university, when you're in your office, do you watch pornography? I knew what the answer was because I was a professor at the university. You can't, because they track everything. You'll get kicked out, you get fired. And he was a very prominent professor. And so he said, no, I can't because I'll get caught and they'll fire me. I go, exactly. So you do have some control. So let's work on that. Let's work on the control that you are able, the same thing that you're able to do at the university. Let's do this, mirror this at home. So we got rid of his laptop. We got rid of his morning coffee and pornography. We got rid of that. And little by little, and this guy was one of the ones that when I asked him the spirituality questions, which we'll talk about later, he said he was agnostic. He didn't believe in God. He didn't have any kind of spiritual belief. He wasn't a religious person. But in a very practical way, we began to remove things that reinforce this behavior. And he was able to make some headway and restore his marriage and, make things better. But you treat it like any addiction disorder. And of course, from a Christian perspective, families that have loved ones that are stuck in addictions know a lot of prayer.
Yeah.
Man.
A lot of prayer.
So we understand the physical effects of pornography and addiction to pornography. What are the effects in your spiritual life? Let's say you are a spiritual person. What does that do to your spiritual life?
Yeah, so that it's one of the tricks of the devil. Addiction is one of the ways the devil gets somebody and enslaves them. Not only to the drug, because the drug is probably a secondary effect. What he's wanting to do is enslave them spiritually and make them his slaves, right? So the person feels a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of frustration because they can't quit, and they feel very condemned. They feel ashamed. They don't want to, maybe go to church. They don't want to participate in men's groups. They don't want to engage because they feel like I'm being a hypocrite. And so once the devil is able to get you wrapped up in the addiction, whether it's pornography or drugs, the next step he wants to do is he wants to isolate you, separate you, right? And that's where the guilt and the shame comes in, right?
Right.
Is separated. And once the devil has you separated and isolated, then he begins to do his work. And a lot of these men suffer from depression. They have suicidal thoughts. They They have a hard time, functioning at their job. They have a hard time, being healthy husbands and fathers and relating to their kids, relating to the wife. I mean, the devil just does a number on them. And ultimately, the devil's goal is to kill you, to destroy you.
Right.
And so those are just tools that he uses to get you there. So it's a very effective tool, unfortunately, that the devil's able to use to get men separated, isolated, depressed, and then,
Because his goal is to separate you completely from the Lord.
Yeah. Separate you from the church, separate you from the Lord, separate you from your wife, separate you from your kids. One person that I was treating for substance abuse said, Dr. Molina, then this guy had like 12 years sobriety. He was a strong Christian and he relapsed. And he said, Dr. Molina, you don't understand, is that the drug, in his case, it was crack. He says the drug tells you that you don't need food, you don't need to sleep, you don't need water, you don't need relationships. It tells you don't need anything but it. And that's the way addiction works. And that's the same way pornography works. It becomes almost like they're all in all. And it's a trick of the devil to enslave us.
You'll never know when you first, like any other person, when they first started getting into something like pornography or any addiction, you'll never know how far it's going to take you.
Yeah.
Right? You think it's just one time. Oh, it's just once, it was cool that one time. The next month it's another time. And then eventually becomes your morning coffee.
Right.
And there's at that point, there's nothing you can do about it. It's almost as if the moment you realize that there's a problem, it's too late. And then you need to find that medical or spiritual.
Yeah. And so there are also medications that we could prescribe people. So we intervene with that reinforcement pathway in the brain, that dopamine reinforcement pathway, through medications that we use to disrupt that.
Mm-hmm.
And we re-hijack the system. So the system that was supposed to be used to reinforce healthy behaviors and get you to get married and have kids and just have a good life and enjoy life gets hijacked by pornography or gets hijacked by this drug, and the person becomes enslaved. And so through working with a professional, we begin to put barriers between the person and that drug or that pornography, and then we could intervene with medications to re-hijack that system and tell the person, because when they stop, there are real effects. They have real feelings, emotions, physical symptoms that we call withdrawals, that even pornography, even though it's not a drug, there are things that happen to these people in their lives that they have to make sense of. They have to so because everything that they're thinking, everything that, sometimes we say the devil's putting thoughts in your mind, is pushing you to get back to it.
Yeah.
And so there are medications that will disrupt that process.
Right.
It will make that what we call craving. We call that a craving.
Isn't there medications you give smokers to take, and it removes the craving completely?
Yeah, it lessens the craving. Yeah. In some cases, it could remove it, but it helps with the craving. So there's a behavioral intervention, then there's a medication intervention, and then, of course, there's education, right? Is talking to them like what we're doing today, talking to them about the effects and the impact of that behavior. So I would rather people not even start.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine, right?
There's nothing to break. There's no addiction to break.
Preventative medicine, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why, in what the way I think about it is why even scratch the surface? Why even dabble? Why even get close? Why even play with it?
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about alcohol later.
Right.
And Christianity and alcoholism, whatever. So that's one of my pet peeves.
Right.
Yeah, you could drink. Sure. The Bible says drink, but do not be drunk. And people talk about that. But if you happen
Jesus
to have,
made wine. That's his first miracle. Yeah. They love that.
But if you happen to be, genetically loaded for that particular substance abuse, as soon as you open that gate,
you're done.
It's very hard to close later.
Yeah.
So why even go there? So when you're raising kids or when you're doing your life or when you're living life, there are boundaries that are important to have in your life.
Right.
To prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the question. You said this guy was sober for 15, 13 years. Yeah. And I mean, it wasn't pornography, it was crack. But what did he tell you the story of how he got after 13 years of being sober? You think he was over it, that he was done with it? Did he say the story of why he went back?
Apparently, he had a divorce.
Okay.
So his wife left him.
Right.
And that was
coping mechanism.
Yeah, it was just more than he can handle. So he regressed and he went back to what he knew. And so he got lost for 2 or 3 days. He went on a binge. And then when he came in, he felt a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, but he taught me more about addiction than I've read from any books. Because he actually, after he got sober, he became an addiction counselor. And so he was doing addiction counseling for many years before he relapsed. So when he came in and I was treating him, he taught me a lot about addiction.
He was teaching you all his tricks on how to keep people out.
Well, how that drug plays tricks on your brain. I've never been addicted. So like, I don't know what goes on in here, you know?
Yeah.
And so he's telling me this is what is going on in here. This is whatever. And then one of the things he taught me, which is interesting, he says, how do you know when an addict is lying?
Wait.
How do you know?
I gotta give an answer. It's because he is not looking you in the eyes.
No, he taught me. He says, I don't know. When do you know? Because I can't figure it out. He goes, when they're moving their lips.
Oh, because they're just talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're just they're talking, they're lying.
They develop a whole kind of defense mechanism, rationalization, denial. They develop a whole system to be able to protect against people knowing or identifying that they're using. And so you have to be very careful. This may be a little controversial, but I've kind of done things that way. And when you're treating somebody for addiction, you don't believe them for a second. No, I haven't used. No, I did use. Their pupils are like super tiny. You know, they're
pinned.
like
They're pinned.
They're pinned pupils.
What are you talking about, officer? I did. I haven't had one dream.
Seems to be the
tonight.
officer problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, he taught me that. He says, Jules, I asked him, I asked him, how do I know? Because I feel like I keep getting duped by over and over again. He goes, Jules, when their lips are moving, you know, just assume, just know that, you know, they've had this whole system that they've developed and they've grown in their life and their personality to be able to protect that addiction.
Yeah.
And so when you address people like this, and if it's something in your own life, you got to be very transparent. Remember, the devil wants to take you to darkness. He wants to separate you and isolate you. So you want to do the opposite.
Right.
You want to be in the light. You want to be involved. You want to be engaged. You want to participate, you know? And when you're doing that, the first sign of, you know, slipping or regressing, or we call backsliding, it's a lot easier to detect and intervene right away versus, you know, if you're living in the dark, you're living in secret, you're isolating yourself, you're separating yourself. And so,
yeah, if you're part of a small group of a church and you meet every Monday, or if you're constantly engaging with Christian people and they know, hey, wait, this guy didn't show up to men's group.
Yeah.
This guy didn't go to church on Wednesday, you know, and it's easy for someone to call you up the week after and say, hey, we've noticed you've been gone, in comparison to not being involved with anybody of the local church. And then
there's no accountability. No one to check in on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And people think that it's you know, I don't want to be, that's why people stay away from the church. They want anybody to be looking in their lives so that they don't show up. And they don't know that they're actually hurting themselves, because that's what keeps them.
And it's almost like, you know, when you're in church, and sometimes you feel like you're the problem. Like, why are you being so judgmental? Don't judge me. But no, you're not the problem. You're doing the right thing by identifying them and calling them out. That's what they need. What they don't need is people in their lives to be passive and to not say something when something comes up. And you see a lot of famous people, Prince, and you know, a lot of famous people that they're surrounded by a lot of people, but nobody tells them anything. They kind of go with it and they end up overdosing and dying.
Right.
And they lose them. And then later they always say, I wish I would have said something. I wish we would have done something. I wish we would have intervened. So the right thing to do is to intervene.
Right.
You know, so if you have a brother in church that you notice, like, he's not coming, he's starting to isolate again, he's coming up with excuses, whatever, and you kind of know his background, that he has struggled with that in the past, it's not to shame him or to judge him or to make him feel condemned, but it's to stop what the devil's trying to do to him, which is isolate him and separate him. And so you got to come in.
the devil's plans.
Yeah, come in
like
aggressive.
That.
Yeah.
So you mentioned one thing, right? So he relapsed because of a major life event, right? But what are some other things that can come and take place in someone's life that will cause them to fall back in? Because if going back to the topic of pornography, I mean, social media, the first 3 posts, I'm sure you're going to find, or TikTok, you're going to find something that's inappropriate, some girl dancing inappropriately or barely dressed, or one of your friends went to. So there's always, I feel like, it's easy for the enemy to plant a seed, right? 100%. So what are some things that people should look out for when they're trying to, if they're battling this thing, right? To get to stay out.
And well, we live in Miami, right? So
yeah,
in Miami, like you don't have to drive too far to see like
No. Go to the
some
beach.
skimpy dressed woman, or we go to the beaches a lot, and so that's something that is always there. It's always tickling, and it's always something that is constantly a tool that the devil could always use to reintroduce, to kind of drag you back down and enslave you again, which is his goal. I always say, if the devil has your thought life, if he has your brain, if he has your neurocognitive processes and he's controlling them, he has you. So one of the tricks of the devil, I believe, is that when you do see something, a passerby, or it may be a billboard, it may be something that kind of could trigger that old pathway and want to go and, kind of trigger all those neurons to kind of go back there. As a Christian, you start saying, oh my God, I did it again. I failed. I'm never going to get better. Lord, forgive me. I'm so sorry. And we start in the mode of kind of like a repentance, of like a whatever, but we spend minutes and then we find ourselves hours. And then like half the day, we're feeling guilty about the thought that we just had, about what we just saw. And so the devil has had our thoughts
For the whole day, for
the
one
whole
seed.
day.
Yeah.
And okay, you've been repenting, you've been feeling bad about it, but in actuality, you're lighting up those old pathways is what you're doing. So the best thing to do is you see this thing flash by, you see this thing come up in your computer, whatever, shut it down, shut it off, look away, and just, Lord, forgive me. Don't think about it for 2 more seconds.
Yeah.
Be done with it.
Yeah.
Don't even like, it's almost kind of like if you're walking out of your house and you walk by your bed and boom, you stub your toe, you have to get to work and you're going to be late. So like you go and you keep getting dressed or whatever, and 2 seconds later, you don't even feel it anymore.
Right.
It's gone. But if you're like, oh, I hit my toe, baby, give me some ice. I need a Tylenol. I can't you could be there for like an hour.
I can't believe it caused me to get late to work and the rest of the day's ruined because of that one thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it to me, a lot of this, because it is a physiological, right? So it's pathways, neural pathways.
Right.
It's psychological, it's emotional, but it's also spiritual, right? So you can't give ground to the enemy.
Yeah.
So if you've taken up this ground, don't give him a second. If you see something, so what? Lord, forgive me. Move on. Don't think about it for 2 more seconds.
Yeah, and something that you remind me of with that sentiment is Matthew 5:30. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one member of your body than to for your whole body go to hell. Right. So whatever another thing, what I can see people talk about, and it's even helped my own life. If there is something that I see is constantly causing me to, see seeds being thrown my way from the enemy. If you don't need to follow a person that posts inappropriate things, unfollow them.
100%.
There's no reason.
100%.
Oh, but we go way back. No, you have no idea. This is my cousin, my friend, whatever. It's why? For what? For what purpose?
100%. And so, if your eye makes you sin, pluck it out. It's better to get to heaven with one eye than to go to hell with both eyes, whatever. So, this could be all right. Get a flip phone.
Yeah.
Razor.
Yeah.
Get a razor. Go old school.
And it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like something extreme, but what's more important? You having social media or a flip phone on your wife?
Get rid of the iPad. Get rid of the laptop. Get rid of the computer that's in the corner of your house where nobody could see. Get rid of the cable channel. Get rid of cable. Go antenna. Well, these are very practical things that will definitely help you in your life if you're able to be disciplined enough and proactive enough to take these steps. And again, even if you're not, if you're coming to men's group, if you're hanging around with people, somebody will tell you, bro, get rid of your phone. Look, I got you this flip phone, and like in the community of the brothers,
they'll look out for each other.
We're safe, but as soon as you separate yourself and you isolate yourself and you get away, that's when the devil begins to enslave you again.
And it's not like you have to stick with the flip phone or that decision for the rest of your life, because once you remove that and the addiction is gone, there's always chance for relapse, but you can now gauge, okay, what is can I tolerate?
And that's a controversial topic, right? Because is an addiction ever gone? Right? That's a controversial topic.
Wait. Let me think about that for a second.
Because it's behavioral. It's who you are.
I want to say yes.
That's what I think.
Yeah, of course.
We know the Bible's promise is that you are a new creation, right?
Right.
All things are made new. Okay, that's true. And in a miraculous, transformational way, that can happen. And we've heard of stories of people that were crack addicts and from one day to the next got saved.
Yeah,
and
half
got
of our
clean.
guests, yeah.
Yeah. And so we hear those stories, but remember, those neural pathways potentially are still there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, some people give the example of like when people cut across the grass, when they cut across the corner, you
Yeah.
see there's like a new path on the grass that's not the pathway. And so until the grass grows and is healthy and looks like everything else, that thing is still a pathway. So the brain doesn't forget.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't reboot their brain. You can't push a button and reboot your brain. So your behaviors and your activities, especially when it comes to addictions, in a very strong way, you know, are there,
Yeah.
you know, and add to that potentially genetic loading, which means in your family history, there's addiction to alcohol, to pornography, to drugs, whatever. So, you know, it may be a behavior that you may be able to gain back and whatever, but you always have to be prayerful and mindful.
Yeah.
You know, if that was your thing, you know, you got to be prayerful, mindful, and remain accountable so that you don't fall back into it.
Yeah.
Because
be self-aware, set up those checks and balances for yourself, and be accountable.
yes,
Yeah, the verse again. Another verse comes to mind is the only person that really needs to be the person that should be cautious and concerned is the person that's proud, right? 1 Corinthians 10:12. So if you think you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall, right? Because
Yes.
once you think I'm over it, that's the old me, and that'll never happen again. You know, pride comes before a fall, and you should be vigilant, even after
100%.
years of being
100%.
Sober.
And there's a verse that says, "Be ye transformed
Mm-hmm.
by the renewing
Of your mind.
of your mind."
Must be a psychiatrist's favorite verse.
Daily.
It's a great verse. So how do you renew your mind? So
Mhm.
be transformed by the renewing your mind by changing pathways. How do you change pathways? How do you reboot the brain? Whatever is spend time in the Word of God. Spend time memorizing Scripture. Spend time in the Word of God. Spend time memorizing Scripture. Spend time in prayer.
Yeah.
Spend time in worship. And that starts repairing
Yeah.
and replenishing, you know, all the healthy pathways and all the sick pathways, and starts transform. You begin to transform. But if your mind isn't transformed, you know, it's very hard to change behavior if it's not, you know. And so
But it's a continual thing.
it's continual.
I think somebody said it best, Maggie from our church. She says, you know, the Christian life is like you're walking up an escalator going down,
right.
right? The moment that you stop fighting going up, you naturally, because we have that natural sin nature, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not vigilant in your prayer life and trying to get closer to God, and something that's interesting about the What is a Man book is that there's no chapter or a whole page dedicated to talking about pornography. I don't think it even mentions it not one time in the book, and it's because it's once you treat the not the symptom, but what is it called, the root.
The root illness.
So what is we talked about some medical treatments, but in terms of somebody coming to you from the church and saying, "Hey, look, I'm dealing with this, I'm struggling with it," what advice would you give that person?
Yeah. You know, so number one, always remember the devil already has them in his corner.
Mm-hmm.
So the devil's already made them a slave to that addiction, to the whatever.
Right.
They already feel bad about it. They already feel shame. They already feel, so it doesn't help for you to kind of come down on them and start, you know, whatever. Obviously, if they're asking for help, they're willing to whatever. So start working on moving forward, right? And so what we talked about, right? So like the behavioral changes, the accountability, the kind of get rid of your laptop, get rid of your iPad, get rid of your phone, coming to church, getting involved in ministry. What does getting involved do? It makes you be there. So
yeah, if you're there, you can't be elsewhere doing that.
Yeah. And when you're there, so there's an addiction mindset, right? So like before the actual behavior, there's a way people think that lead them to relapse. And there's a way that people think that lead them to a healthy life. And so one of the things that we've talked a little bit about it already is the person that has the addiction mindset is very kind of defensive and like protecting themselves and blaming others. So when you see that, that means their brain's going in the wrong direction and relapse is not far away. But when a person is like surrendered and they say, look, I take responsibility. I want to do better. I want to be accountable. What can I do? And so when they come to you with that mindset, you already know they're thinking the right way. And so when they say that, you know, like, yeah, behavioral changes, get rid of this, get rid of that. And, you know, they do it.
Right.
And it's not a battle. The people that are still, you know,
Yeah.
but why? Why do you make me do this? Why are you judging me? You know, it's not my fault. It's because my dad. It's because my mom. It's because the preacher. It's because he said, she said, because I got offended, you know, and they're kind of stuck in the past. And the people that are, you know, getting better and healing are more about the future, and they're setting goals and they're making plans and they're looking to get better.
Right.
The addiction mindset is about the past, about what happened, and regrets and bitterness and anger. And so when you're talking to them, just by your conversation with them, you could kind of get an idea of where they're at.
Yeah.
Are they moving towards sobriety and health, or are they still stuck and not far away from relapse?
Right.
And so depending on where they're at, and you got to kind of get a feel for it, your interventions have to be more aggressive, or your interventions be more passive, long-term
Right.
kind of interventions. So it depends, but primarily what I like to do is give them 2 or 3 kind of instructions, easy, low-level instructions, and then seeing if they do it.
Yeah.
If they come back and they say, hey, I did this, I did that, and you were right, I'm feeling better, and it's better, whatever, then I know this is somebody that's serious and somebody that really wants to do the work.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how many times at church, in men's group, different men, I've said, and I don't do this for anybody, right? But just because I'm like checking my own brain, because I doubt, and I hate to doubt, you know, you're in church, you want to have faith, you want to believe. I'm like, hey, call me 24/7. I'm on call. This is what I do for a living. I could even prescribe for you medications. Just call me. When you're about to whatever, call me and we could talk and I'll get you the medication. I like make myself available 100% for them. I do not get one call. They do, you know, they don't move in any
Why?
direction towards,
Why do you
because
think
they're
that
not
is?
ready. They're not ready.
Or are they ashamed? Or
No, they're not ready.
not ready.
The
don't
devil
wanna- they
has
don't wanna
them
let it go.
enslaved and ensnared. And so in that situation, what the family and we at the church do, we just continue to pray for them and you know, and pray to God that God delivers them. But being adults that they are, if they're not ready for change,
Yeah, it's not gonna happen. Yeah, I have one of the last questions I have on this topic is: do you see an easy tell that somebody's involving themselves in pornography is their loss of ambition? Because I feel like that for what some of the other cases that I've dealt with, like you will randomly see some kid just lose interest in doing well in school,
Yeah.
lose interest in hanging out with his friends and goals and what he was planning on doing this year. It's kind of like just kind of dies down.
well, yeah, 100%. So we're talking about reinforcement pathways, right? So if your brain's being flooded by dopamine with one of these tools that the devil uses, could be pornography, could be drugs, could be other things. For some people, it's gambling. If your brain's being flooded, the zone's being flooded with that tool that the devil's using to enslave you, everything else kind of is bland.
Hmm.
You know, playing basketball with my buddies, that's not as exciting as staying home and watching pornography. You know, going to the beach with my friends, that's not as fun, you know, or meeting a new girl on campus, that's not as fun as staying home and, you know, because it really like hijacks that reinforcement
Right, so that's all you're
system.
thinking about pretty much.
Yeah, so it's definitely a physiological phenomenon, right? That's happening in the brain, but also, like you're saying, like an emotional, psychological phenomenon where then the shame, especially in Christian circles, they know they're not supposed to be watching that.
Yeah.
So the devil says, hey, you hypocrite. You pretend to be a true Christian, and so that shame and that guilt, the devil enslaves them with that, and they begin to isolate, and the devil separates them and makes them. So it's a sin like any other sin, right? It's not something that you can't come out of. It's not something that you can be saved from. It's something that you can definitely be saved. A lot of men, recover from that, but you got to begin to take the steps in that direction. And it's a lot easier when you're an adult that you have to get up every morning. You have to go to work because you have to pay the bills. You know, I've had I don't know if you ever heard of functional alcoholic. So what that says somebody that's a full-blown alcoholic but can still get up in the morning and go to work.
Right.
But young people don't have to. So young people, when they have an addiction, whatever, they kind of isolate, they stay in their rooms and whatever, and they don't want to come out. And, you know, and so the devil has a captured audience, you know, and they get very much in their own head and it spirals down. So one of the things is you always ask, you know, I said, do you feel sometimes like life would be better if you weren't alive? You know, because believe it or not, the devil starts putting things in their head that they're ashamed for the family, you know, they're an embarrassment and that they're never going to recover. They're never going to get out of this. and that's probably just better for them to take. And so ultimately, that's the devil's goal.
Right.
The devil wants to kill you, and so when he enslaves you, then he separates you, then he isolates you. You get very much in your head, the guilt, the shame, the frustration, the depression, and then kids end up taking their lives.
Yeah.
I think I could resonate with that. That was the moment, I was down in the dumps. I was in my addictions. I felt like there was no hope. I didn't have any, want to do anything. Everyday task seemed, like a huge task. You know what I mean? And it was like, man, I'm just sitting here isolated in my room day in and day out, waking up at 2, 3 o'clock.
This isn't life.
This is not life.
Yeah.
And I reached a point where I was like, I'm done, you know? And of course, just like you said, those thoughts came in, suicide, look at everyone else doing better than me.
Yeah.
Woe is me.
And compound that in the church.
Yeah.
These kids are getting into college. These kids got girlfriends. These kids got boyfriends. The pastor mentioned them from the pulpit. They're whatever. And me? And so the devil gets really like...
You start comparing yourself to
Yes.
everybody. How am I going to provide for a family? How am I going to own a home? How am I going to pay for insurance, for cars? You're lost. It's a whirlwind. It's a whirlwind. And it comes to a point where it's like...
You're basically fighting a very high-level, professional, ultimate fighting champion.
Rampage Jackson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't even know what you're doing. You're getting your butt kicked left and right. And so... So one of the things that we talk a lot about is, when does the addict become from the sinner, the perpetrator, to the victim, right? So when does that happen? Because you can see a victim there.
Right.
You can see that the devil has victimized them and they're about to kill themselves, right? So as a Christian, as a pastor, like, when do you approach the person as like, you're a perpetrator, man. You're just like...
Yeah, you're a
player.
You're getting yourself in
you're a
these
player,
problems.
man. You're a gangster. You just want to play. You just want to whatever. You just want this. Versus like, man, you're enslaved.
Yeah.
You're a victim and you don't have long to live. You better run for your life. Let's go, So as a pastor, as a minister, you got to know where you're at, because I've had pastors that have had kids come to them and reach out to them, and they didn't know how to discern where they were at, and the kid went home and killed himself.
Wow.
And so... you have to know, the difference between it, because that ultimately is the devil's goal, is to kill him. And of course, that's not what God wills. It's not.
I've had a couple cases too of kids at church that they mess up, and they'll come to me. I'm like, the first thing they tell me is, all right, did you repent? Yeah, I feel terrible. Whatever. All right, awesome. It's done, over with.
Right.
The devil would love to make you start thinking, oh man, I can't believe I did that. I shouldn't be coming to church. People are looking at me weird now,
Right.
even though nobody knows what they did.
Right.
But the devil starts putting in things in their head so that
shame.
they would leave. Right. It's the mountain of shame that the devil loves to put on anything. And it's funny because some of these kids are in church are saints, right? Like they drank a beer for the first time.
It's
and
the good kids.
Right. And
it's the good kids that get stuck.
I can't believe I did that.
I said stupid.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
sorry.
like, man, just forget about it. It's
Yeah.
over with. No, I just don't know. Keep hanging out with your friends.
Yeah.
They look at you the same exact way. No, they look at me different now. No, they don't. They love you. If they're your real friends, they look at you the same way. So just move past it, and and that's the best way to go about it, because it's true what you're saying. That if they allow it, it can be buried with the weight of
100%.
embarrassment and shame that comes with it.
100%.
So transitioning here now from pornography to substance abuse, right? You talked about the functional alcoholics, some of these cases you had with crack and all that stuff. So they're both addictions, right? But what would you say is kind of a harder addiction to treat? What did you say? It's substance abuse or pornography? Just a random question.
The problem with pornography nowadays is that it's everywhere.
Yeah.
They call it ubiquitous, right? It's like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere you turn, there's an opportunity to use, right?
It's free.
Yeah. And reinforce those pathways, and it's free.
If you hear the amount of money that these OnlyFans models, they do pornography, they're making more than close to what LeBron James makes, like the top ones, these top earners.
Yeah, sure.
So it's just so crazy how it's everywhere, like
Yeah.
you're saying. So
So
that's harder because it's everywhere.
Here's something funny. So the individual that the professor was treating, that would wake up in the morning, a cup of coffee, and watch his porn, I found, so what happened was like, he started to have an affair as a result of living in that fantasy world.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually that fantasy world doesn't stay up here, but eventually you act it out.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it ends up being an affair. It ends up being an emotional or physical relationship with somebody that's not your spouse. And so it happened to him. And so he was like bewildered because he loved his wife. They've been married for 50 years and they were like amazing, the best friends. And now
50 years.
I'm losing my wife. I'm losing my wife. And he was like very high level kind of professor. He was in his best time of his career, very, very well known. And when I said, your pornography every single morning is what led to that affair, he like connected the dots, like a little light bulb went on his head. Oh my God. You're right. So there's a direct cause and effect. So that's how I got him to start cutting back on the pornography. And his wife traveled the country speaking against pornography. That's what she did for a living.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Is that crazy? So even though we kind of know pornography is not good, a lot of times we don't know why it's not good. So we talked about erectile dysfunction. We talked about eventually living out the fantasy that you're living on the screen in your mind. You live it out and it ends up being an emotional affair or a physical affair.
Social inadequacies. You can't have a normal conversation with a girl because that's all you're thinking about is.
So there are consequences to this, but a lot of times we don't know what they are. And so I love this conversation. So I think pornography is probably a bigger problem, but unfortunately, I think that it's hard to say that pornography leads to death, even though we know in Christendom and spiritual world that that's the devil's ultimate goal is to kill you. But we definitely know how alcohol leads to thousands and thousands of deaths every year. You know, and so
And that's not only for the user, that's for, people at the end of it, drunk drivers.
Yeah. So if you had to guess what, fentanyl's a big topic right now, fentanyl deaths, you know, and like moving the sky and everything, and the government's talking about fentanyl use and we're shutting down the board and fentanyl use, whatever. What would you guess kills more people every year, fentanyl or alcohol?
Alcohol.
I mean, just the way that you had
It's like
the
double.
question.
It's like double alcohol.
Yeah, but there's nobody throwing up pitchforks for banning alcohol. Yeah.
So alcohol is studied and researched more than all the other drugs combined.
Right.
So we know more about alcohol than any other drug. We have more studies than any other drug. It causes more fatalities, dysfunction, and legal problems, and it's a burden on our legal system, on our families, on our own health system. Right?
That's so true. Like if you tell somebody I'm using fentanyl, they'll be like, but it's like you tell someone I drunk the other weekend, no big deal, but it's more deadly.
Yes.
Do you think it's because it's legalized?
So what kills more people every year? All the other drugs, all the other illicit drugs known to man, or alcohol?
Probably alcohol.
I would say alcohol. Again,
Alcohol.
I go back to because it's legal.
Yes.
It's used more.
Yes. So alcohol kills more people every year than all the drugs combined. Okay. So why do we not have a serious approach to alcohol? Why has a church kind of taken a back seat on this topic and kind of like watered it down? It's not a big deal. So what I see, when I'm running the substance abuse clinic, is if I have 15 patients scheduled one day, 13 of them, their families are destroyed. They ended up in divorce. They have health problems. They have all kinds of losing their jobs or in bankruptcy because of alcohol. And the other 2 or 3, smoking flakka or, crack.
Yeah, but the other ones are because of the alcohol abuse, and the other ones are
Flakka's crazy.
A lot more people because of alcohol.
right.
Yeah.
So now I'm a pastor, right? And I go to church and I see people, it's not a big deal, whatever. It's legal. Well, what else is legal?
Cigarettes.
So we
vaping.
could participate?
Right.
Is that the argument?
That's the moral standard. Is if it's legal, you can indulge.
Right. So my standard is like, what do I see personally? And if you actually inquired further, you would realize what destroys our families in this country more than any other drug? Alcohol. All the other drugs are important. I'm not a fan of marijuana. I'm not a fan of cocaine and I prescribe psychiatric medications with a lot of caution and a lot of knowledge and a lot of thought. I don't do that readily. So alcohol. So if we could like move the curb on alcohol, it'll impact many more families and many more marriages and many more kids than almost anything else. Now, pornography is a problem. Okay, don't get me wrong. It's a huge problem because it's a very kind of secretive, discreet way that if you're not a proactive parent, the devil will steal your kids from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an art to capturing the essence of an event. So maybe don't film everything like it's your cat's birthday party. TME Solutions will shoot clean, professional photo and video content. They've got the right gear, the right eye, and a strong opinion that good enough isn't good enough. No cinematic miracles from a phone. With TME Solutions, you can count on crisp visuals that actually reflect the hard work you put in. Hit them up on Instagram at TME Solutions or click the link in the description below. Now back to the podcast.
So speaking about, alcohol is something that is legal, so people use it, and it's actually more catastrophic and destructive than fentanyl or these hard drugs. What do you think about legalizing marijuana? It seems like it's everywhere now. Every corner you look, there's a cannabis store. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on weed?
The caveat to the fentanyl situation is that they're making drugs, they're making street drugs, and they're mixing fentanyl into the street drugs and not notifying the people that are buying the street drugs. So people are taking the street drugs thinking it's a Lortab or Percocet or, and because it's mixed with fentanyl, people are dying.
Overdosing, yeah.
So at least when you drink alcohol, you know what you're putting in your body. So it's kind of more of a choice that you're making that is not a good choice, but at least you're aware.
You know what you're consuming.
You know what you're consuming, the quantity, the content, alcohol content in the drink. So you're aware that what's the sad story behind the fentanyl is these kids, these young kids, high schoolers, college kids, are taking drugs that they usually take at parties, Xanax, whatever.
Yeah.
But because they're mixed with fentanyl, it's the last drug that they take and they literally die. And so that I think why fentanyl has gotten the attention of the nation. But we should never lose sight of the alcohol problem in our society and especially in our churches. And don't be casual about it because it is destroying families. It is destroying families. So in any case, now we're gonna talk about marijuana.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
so what is worse in your mind?
Weed.
Somebody that participates in recreational marijuana, or
Yeah.
just a casual drinker?
Yeah. So all the studies that have been done on marijuana, which again, there's been a lot of studies done on marijuana. None of them are good. There's no study that says marijuana is good for you. And people talk about, for arthritis, or people talk about for seizures, or people talk about for all these other things. Well, there are medications to treat those conditions and that are pretty effective to treat those conditions. So marijuana is never like a go-to drug for any of those conditions.
So you've never prescribed a patient to smoke weed?
No.
Really?
No.
Because so apparently some
Yeah.
doctors that have.
And I can't imagine where these doctors got their licenses or where they went to medical school, because anything that you burn and you inhale to your lungs is a very potent carcinogen. So I can't imagine any doctor that would prescribe or encourage anybody to smoke anything, because like I said, it's a very powerful carcinogen. And
For those that don't understand what carcinogen is, what is that?
yeah, it causes cancer. So yeah.
Right.
So even you'll never heard somebody say, here, smoke some Advil, which
Yeah.
Advil's good, but it's just a carcinogen once you smoke it,
Yeah.
right?
So drugs take a process where when you swallow a drug, it goes through your stomach, it goes through the first pass, the second pass, kind of metabolism or processing that triggers a drug's active ingredient to do its job. And so the lungs just don't have that process. So
that filtering process,
right?
Yeah.
Or the breaking down of the drug and making it the active ingredient where it does its
Beneficial.
job. So
Yeah.
it's hard. There are some medications that you could inhale and help. Obviously, like albuterol for people that have asthma, it has direct action on your lungs. And if you don't have asthma, you shouldn't do it. But if you have asthma, it really helps.
Yeah.
But other than that,
Saved
there are
my
very
life.
few things you should inhale into your lungs.
Yeah.
If anything.
Yeah.
So marijuana is definitely not one of them. You should not. Marijuana, it doesn't have the catastrophic effects, that we see with alcohol. But again, it's an insidious thing. So the studies show that, it's an important drug that needs to be studied and needs to be understood. But it's especially catastrophic to young people. So the young brain. So we call the young brain, under the age of 18, 25, that's a young brain that is in development. So the young brain that is in development, that is exposed to marijuana, that is catastrophic. And some people look at the IQ scores dropping. Some people look at, what they call the amotivational syndrome, which they kind of lose passion and motivation, which is natural in a young person. They kind of lose that, and that's part of the property of the drug that does that. But now we're seeing a spike in kids getting diagnosed with psychotic disorders
Hmm.
only because of marijuana use.
Right.
Not that they're dabbling in other drugs or there's other issues going on, but they've kind of been able to separate the variables and realize that the spike in young people being diagnosed with psychotic disorders is a direct effect of the marijuana. And so marijuana has more than 30 times the potency that it did 20, 30 years ago because it's been kind of
Crossbred
and
yeah.
developed and perfected, and so it's a much stronger drug than it used to be. It's not your casual granddad's marijuana. It's very powerful. And so
these kids they probably wouldn't have these mental disorders or illnesses, but they might be predisposed. But once they start smoking their marijuana, it accelerates.
Yeah, the thought is that these are kids that might be genetically loaded for a mood disorder, psychotic disorder, whatever, and the genes are not being expressed until the brain gets exposed to the marijuana. Then when the brain gets exposed to marijuana, the genes begin to express themselves and they begin to suffer psychotic symptoms. And so that's the thought, and so that's what we're going with. But it's not a kind drug. It's not a mild drug. It's a catastrophic drug. And I used to be the psychiatrist over there at Juvenile Detention Center in Broward, both Broward and Miami. And one of the things that would always get the kids' attention, it's so interesting because these kids are in there, and they're kind of like acting out, and they're kind of trying to be the tough guy, and when they talk about using marijuana, they're 13, 14, 15 years old. Dr. Molina, it's not a big deal. It's legal. It's not a big deal. I always tell them this. I says, look at the adults in your life. Look at all the adults in your life that use marijuana and ask yourself, do you want to be like them when you grow up? And their face just drops.
Look at your future.
Yeah.
Is that what
their
you
face
want?
drops because whether it's the uncles or their aunts or their parents or whatever, the lifestyle that they have, these kids are able, even at that young age, to say, no, I don't want that life. And a lot of times, it impacts these kids at an age when they should be learning at a very significant rate, and they're not.
When you talk about the brain development and introducing certain chemicals to it, and it's destructive to a brain that's developing, what would you say to the people that say, yeah, well, what about Vyvanse? What about Adderall? What about these other drugs that are uppers and have amphetamines in them?
Right. Yeah. So absolutely. That's, like I said before, like whenever we prescribe these medications for kids, adolescents, and even adults, we do it with a lot of thought and a lot of foreknowledge, a lot of understanding of the drug itself. The milligram, the strength, the dosage, the quantity, the intervals, the half-life of the drug. So it's a very controlled kind of treatment, And so now we've been prescribing stimulants for people with ADHD, children with ADHD for more than 30, 40 years now. And we've seen the outcomes, and the outcomes have been significant as far as quality of life and being able to, pursue their studies and their goals and become professionals and thrive in the professional world. And it hasn't had that impact, that, a negative impact. So we have history. And again, the problem with marijuana and a lot of the street drugs, frankly, is that you don't know the potency.
Yeah.
You don't know the dosage.
Yeah.
You don't know the half-life, and
you're just trusting the person selling it to you that it's they did their due diligence.
All those variables. So, for example, if somebody were to get Vyvanse and abuse it, they would get symptoms of abusing the Vyvanse, which is not different from people that use cocaine, which they could become paranoid and agitated and could even become psychotic.
Yeah.
And so, under medical supervision, and I've even thought, being like, I'm an advocate for my patients. I want people to do well. So, so many people use marijuana. I've even thought, is there a possible way to be able to use this drug effectively that would help with anxiety, whatever? And I had this discussion with my patient. I says, well, if there's a way that we can figure out what is the right dosage for you and be able to maintain that dosage over 24-hour periods so you don't have the dips and the relapses in marijuana, despite popular belief, does have withdrawal symptoms. Withdrawal symptoms of anxiety, rebound anxiety, irritability, anger. They could even get aggressive. insomnia, and a lack of appetite. So a lot of people, when they stop using, they lose weight. And people that have used for many, many years, these withdrawal symptoms are even more important. And I've had patients that smoke for 35 years, they're adults now, and they stop smoking, and their anxiety is so bad. None of the conventional medications that we use for anxiety are able to help them.
Yeah.
And so I've been inclined to say, listen, why don't you start smoking again? You know,
Yeah, just to get them. They were doing so much better
you
with it.
smoked for 35 years. Why'd you stop? You know? And it's funny, the different reasons, but you know, it's very frustrating because we don't know the dosage, we don't know the potency, we don't know the frequency. There's a lot of things that we don't know about it, so it's hard to do it appropriately under medical supervision.
Right.
And the other idea is that marijuana is not a gateway drug.
That was one of my questions. Is
Yeah.
is weed a gateway drug?
100%,
Yes.
100%.
From personal experience, from
Yeah.
Personal
clinical
experience. Yes.
So it was thought that it was a milder drug, but since it's been legalized in so many states, we're starting to understand it better.
Yeah.
And one of the key ways we found out is because people that are using other drugs, we asked them, what was the first drug you ever used?
Right.
And a large percentage of them say it was marijuana.
Yeah.
But again, we talked about the reinforcement system in the brain, right?
Yeah.
So once that reinforcement system plateaus because the marijuana you're using isn't tickling your brain the way it used to, you're not getting that high and that whatever that you're getting before, you know, inevitably these kids' curiosity lead them to try, experiment with other drugs.
Yeah.
And it may lead to more serious drugs. But
Yeah.
marijuana's impact on the young brain is serious enough.
Yeah.
So there's nothing benign about it or mild about it. In a young person's developing brain, it's catastrophic. Now, in older people, say you're 50, 60, 70 years old and you want to smoke your weed, you know, because you have glaucoma, they say, or you have some anxiety, or you have problems sleeping at night, or you have
Appetite issues.
poor appetite, you
Yeah.
know? And so they say, well, they want to smoke. Well, now you're getting into the cognitive impact, which means the way the brain fires off its neurotransmitters, the way we think, the way we memorize, the way we focus, the way we concentrate, the way we do the things that we do every day without even really thinking about it. Like, how does marijuana impact that? And it impacts it in a serious enough way that we don't recommend it
Right.
for older people.
Right.
Even though you would think, right, their brain's developed, it's not gonna like harm them in the way it harms
can
young
harm
people,
kids, yeah.
but it harms them in a different way that's important.
Right.
And there are medications that treat appetite problems, that treat insomnia, that treat these other things. That again, we understand the potency, we understand the dosage, we understand what frequency, we understand the half-life. So under medical supervision, you know, you're able to treat these conditions in a I mean, I've never personally had a patient whose anxiety I couldn't treat, or whose depression I couldn't treat, or whose seizures I couldn't treat.
Right.
You know, there are many medications that we call them, like, there's a lot of like weapons, a lot of tools that we could use to treat. And if one medication doesn't sit well with you, we could try this one. That one doesn't well, we could try this one, you know? If that one doesn't, we could try a combination of the two.
Yeah.
But we're always able to treat in a very controlled way.
A conventional way, yeah.
And so the idea is, what do we try to do? We try to improve quality of life, right? That's what we try to do. We try to improve your quality of life. That's the goal, is to improve your quality. So whenever there's a drug or substance that doesn't achieve the goal of improving your quality of life, generally speaking, a doctor should not be prescribing it.
Right, because it'll treat that one symptom for anxiety, but then it'll cause so many other issues with what the side effects are for smoking weed.
Correct.
But everybody's gonna quote that one study. Well, that's one kid for years was trying to be treated for his seizures, and they could never stop having seizures. But then they smoked weed one time, and the seizures went away like that. So
Yeah.
that's like everyone's favorite story
Yeah.
for the pro.
Seizures, you
marijuana.
know, talking about seizures, I mean, if somebody out there has seizures or whatever, but talking about seizures are very susceptible to stress. So stress management is very important in like keeping your seizures at bay. People that get dehydrated, their seizure threshold drops, and so they could have seizures. People that don't sleep well or like have jet lag could get seizures. So there's a lot of things that could predispose a body or lower the seizure threshold so they get seizures. So you could argue marijuana helps
Because it checks off all
stress
those boxes.
management, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you can argue that. But the thing is, like, how do you keep the blood levels at a place where it kind of could control that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? You can't. So these patients that are smoking marijuana that cured their seizures always come back. They always come back. And, you know, we talk about it and we go through whatever, but you have to put them on an anti-epileptic, control
Right.
the seizures, whatever. And then they want to smoke marijuana. I mean, you can't control the world, you know, like whatever. But believe me, it's not a cure for seizures.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the question of, okay, well, you treating the symptom or you treating the cause, right? Like,
Right.
why do you have anxiety,
Right.
right? And so a lot of people that become Christians and they finally receive that peace, miraculously no longer need the weed, right? They no longer need to smoke that because, God is now giving them the peace that they need. They're now living a life that is pleasing to God. And so because they're outside of a life of sin, they now have the fruits of the Spirit that you receive when you live your life with God. The question that I wanted to ask you is, so the DARE, right? Don't do drugs, that whole thing that went through across all public schools to teach kids not to get involved with drugs, ended up educating kids more about drugs and getting them more into it than it did help them get away from it. So the question is, how do you educate the next generation on drug use without it being like a commercial for street drugs?
Yeah. What was it? This is your brain.
And this is your brain on drugs.
And this is your brain on drugs. You remember that? It was
Yeah.
an egg that was frying in
Yeah.
the pan. So yeah, that was very effective. Not. Okay, human nature, right? So like, I do believe 100% on educating, but educating correctly. And unfortunately, a lot of the education we were talking about earlier off camera, we were talking about how a lot of the laws and a lot of policies that address drug addiction, alcohol use, and all this stuff are very politically driven. The education is very politically driven. A lot of it is not the black and white truth about things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but if you're saying if you're educating correctly, I believe education 100%. Like I want to tell kids about the impact of drugs on their brain and how it could sidetrack their lives and how it could sidetrack their goals and their dreams and their relationships. I want to tell them, and I want to tell them how. I want to tell them what it looks like. I want to tell them where not to go. I want to tell them that. And some kids are going to probably take advantage of that and go there, that's that. But a lot of kids aren't.
Right.
And so my concern is not the kids that want to do drugs and are actively seeking to do drugs. My concern are the kids that show up at a party, a birthday party, an innocent birthday party, and they see a drug and their friends are saying, try this, try that. And I want them to remember, this is what this drug does to your brain and this is how it does it.
Right.
And I want them to pass on it.
Right.
I don't want them to take it. I want them to know.
Wow. So good. But let's pause for a quick word from our sponsors. If you run a business, whether it be an IT company, a law firm, or any small business that wants more clients, these are the folks to talk to. AMP Marketing does SEO and email marketing that actually works. No gimmicks, no wasted ad dollars, just proven strategies to help you get found online and get more leads. They've been doing this for over 20 years, so they know what works. Check them out at ampmarketing.com and get amped. Now back to the podcast. Well, we've talked a lot about, your clinical experience and your pastoral experience, but you have 4 kids. 2 of them,
Yes.
which are they're all extremely educated and have gone to the heights of what the career can take them, right?
Yeah.
You have 2 doctors and you have one in interior architecture and you have
Yes.
one that's speech pathologist, I believe.
Speech pathology.
So how did you educate your kids to not get involved with this?
We were always very blunt with them. And, we talked to them about the impact and the effects of alcohol. And we pointed to people that struggled with alcohol. And we said, look at their lives. And they're not bad people. They just made bad decisions.
Right.
And this is how they ended up. And so you're no better than them. And if you do alcohol, it's very possibly this is where you could end up because
Right.
that's just what alcohol does. And you shouldn't. So I pointed them to people that were in our lives at the time, that were in front of them, that they could see the impacts of these things in their lives. And we talked about alcohol and drugs and
environment, right? You just said it in terms of a clinical. You're worried about the kids that go to those parties where they're indulging in that, but you made sure that your kids would never.
Well,
participate
inevitably, your kids are going to go to parties.
Right, but depending what type of party they're going to is
where
concern.
the rubber met the road for us, because they went to parties and whatever. But where the rubber met the road for us was when they did their travel. What are they
summer
called?
abroad
abroad trips. So they were in another country with a bunch of drinkers and partiers for a month.
Yeah.
Right. So did my education come through? Did it get across?
Right.
Did it work?
Yeah.
And so when they came back, they said, "Nah, we didn't drink. Of course not, because this guy and they, they pointed and they respected or feared so much not to And, I talked to him about the genetic loading. And in our family, we have uh, uh, a couple of people that became addicted to alcohol
Yeah.
and got sick because of alcohol and died because of alcohol.
Yeah.
So we have that in our family.
Mm.
And so, I talked to him about how genetic loading works.
Yeah. You know what I love about it is the fact that science will always point back to scripture, right? And the Bible talks about generational curses.
Yes.
And that is the reality. The scientific way about it is because of its genetic loading. People
Yeah.
are predisposed to,
Yeah.
depending on what their ancestors
Right.
dealt with,
Right.
it affects them.
Yeah, 100%. And, they, again, another thing, and they taught me this. So somebody taught me that if your kids have goals and dreams that they want to shoot for and they want to achieve, they're less likely to get involved in things that are going to interrupt those goals and those dreams. So my kids have always been like forward looking and wanting to do things and wanting to become things and want to study and relationships. So they kind of sense, and we taught them that the only thing alcohol could do and drugs and getting pregnant, right? So like one of the things that a lot of young people, so I worked in a school here in Coral Gables where it was for young people that got pregnant when they were in junior high or high school and they couldn't go back to the regular school. So they would come to that school. And so I was a counselor there. And so I met a lot of young girls that their career, their life, their high school, their prom night, all these beautiful things that kids experience at that age were kind of like sidetracked because they got pregnant. And I talked to my kids about that. I said, so drugs, alcohol, and getting pregnant, or my son getting somebody pregnant, then you have to like own up to it and you have to provide for that kid and that woman, and you have to, it could really sidetrack your goals in your career. So everything in God's timing is perfect and is beautiful, but outside of God's timing, it could be catastrophic. Now, and again, pointing to real life situations of people that were not bad people. And this is important because a lot of times as Christians, to our kids, we talk about that's a bad person and that's why. That's a bad person. That's why. If not for the grace of God, there go I, right? That's what I taught my kids. And so I'm not better than that person. And if that person fell, and again, I've treated judges, lawyers, surgeons, dentists, all kinds of people from all spheres of life that were stuck on drugs, cocaine and alcohol. Alcohol. And so, so it's not about being smart. It's not about being wealthy. It's not about being educated. It's not about, like, none of these things protect you, not even being a Christian. Being a Christian does not immunize you.
Right.
I was telling my kids, God gives you the strength to do the right thing.
Right.
That's God's grace, but if you choose to do something wrong, you're going to own the consequences. Just like if you weren't Christian.
Absolutely.
Right. How important was it and how did you do it to make sure your kids were constantly looking forward to and striving to those high achieving goals, right? Because again, becoming the best in their class, being their best in their teams, achieving for these very high, hard careers. How did you kind of like allow them to have their own interests and decide what they want to do, but also kind of encourage them on what path to take?
We talk about this all the time in men's group, right? We talk about like the things that you celebrate, the things that you give weight to, the things that you make important in your life as a family are the things that your kids are going to celebrate, the things your kids are going to consider important. And so to them, it was almost like, of course, I got to get good grades. Of course, I'm going to be a good student. Of course, I'm going to be a good athlete. Of course, I'm going to give 100%, as unto the Lord, So if you make it like the culture of your home, if this is the way you live out your life and this is the way you talk and this is what you give weight to, your kids will give it weight.
You got to make it attractive.
Yeah, including the church, right? So a lot of times we talk about like people downplay the church or minimize the church or water down the church and say, oh, the pastor doesn't know what he's talking about or the pastor's exaggerating or, we criticize the people in church or whatever. Our kids hear that.
Yeah.
And when they hear us despising the body of Christ, they hear us talking bad about the pastor. What do you think our kids are going to think when they grow up? They're the first ones to leave the church. Why? Because the pastor exaggerates, the people are clowns, people aren't serious. And so you got to be very careful. So you got to celebrate these things. And so my wife and I, we made academics a priority. So it's the Lord first, and then family. And then academics was our priority. It wasn't money, right? So we weren't like, oh, we want to become rich or we want to become famous or I want to be popular on social media, which is nothing wrong with any of those things, but we just did not make that a priority. We made a priority studying and working hard and doing our careers And of course, first the Lord, the church, and the family. The family, very, very important. And so that's what we celebrated in our lives. And we made it a priority, you know, to grow up with you guys, to grow up in family, and to get, you know, the rub of the family, the rub of the church, and whatever is beautiful and it's wonderful and it builds character. And we emphasize that.
Yeah.
And so now they love the Lord, they serve in church, they, you know, they love their careers, they work hard, and they want nothing to do. And again, so all by the grace of God.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, right. Like Adam and Eve, right? So like Cain and Abel, right? They grew up in the perfect home, correct?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
I guess so.
There
yeah.
was no,
Yeah,
so-
there's no-
there was
there's
no
no bad
social
influence,
media.
yeah.
There was no social media. There was no internet.
There's
there was
no
pornography.
uncle that was, hey, have a beer. Yeah.
No,
it's-
Yeah.
besides even that and that snake and Cain and Abel, that rock. Or,
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
So sin,
Besides that.
sin
I mean-
entered human race, but they were a perfect home.
They were.
Right, right.
Yeah, it
The
was.
dad walked with God, spoke with God, you know, and mom was a godly woman and whatever. And still, we see how the devil's able to, you know,
Get a foothold.
get a foothold and cause the destruction that he causes. So
Absolutely.
our homes are not. We have to be careful. We have to pray.
Yeah.
We're prayerful.
We're not impervious.
We're not impervious to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always tell people we're not immunized, right? We're not like, we are susceptible to that. So
Yeah.
we got to be watchful. We got to be prayerful. We got to set an example. So it's not one thing or another, but it's all inclusive. But more importantly,
Yeah.
role models of what not to do and
Yeah.
role models of what to do.
yeah.
You know,
So
that helps.
So a verse you had reminded me about is saying that, you know, they giving, you know, every time that you are going to be in a place where drugs could happen and where sleeping around is taking place, and people are like, can be concerned, be like, I don't know how I can handle it. There's a verse in 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation, he will also provide a way of escape, right? So in a way, you know, you're not a victim, right? Just because your surrounding is full of people that smoke or that do weed or do drugs, whatever. God is always giving you the wisdom and the ability to walk away from that. So one last question for substance abuse that I have, which is, we didn't talk about cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
But what, in your thoughts, cigarettes versus vaping? And I think even sometimes vaping out, you have CBD oil in it. So what are your thoughts on those two? What's worse, cigarettes or
Yeah.
weed or vaping?
So vaping is definitely not a very high step up from cigarettes. Okay, so it is a little bit kind of, but
It smells fruity and like mangoes now.
I call them the cloud
And
breathers. Yeah.
And it tastes good. That's
Yeah.
what it is now.
so cigarettes have thousands and thousands of carcinogens, things that cause cancer or that could transform the cells in the lung and create tumors and cancer. And so again, our lungs are not designed to inhale substances. And so a lot of people say, well, you know, is it like saline solution that you inhale? Is it whatever? It's not. It's an aerosol, right? So an aerosol has chemicals in it that are not made for the lungs, including food dye or flavor, you know, all these things that are in vaping and are also potential carcinogens, could cause cancer and could cause lung disease.
Right.
And so the vaping situation hasn't been going on for a long time. And usually it takes like 10 years before, like in a very scientific,
Good data that
good
you can,
data
yeah,
they can definitely say. But what we're seeing right now is not happy.
a promising
Yeah.
It's not.
outcome.
It's not. And so everybody's very tentative to just kind of come out and completely condemn it because we don't have all the data yet, but the data that we do have is not good. And so 100% we discourage it, do not encourage vaping. In fact, vaping is not allowed in public areas because we know the impact it has. And if you want to do it by yourself at home, that's fine. But to do it in public, it's not allowed. It's illegal. And so, and some vapes come with their own little chemical, whatever that you vape. And some vapes you could add chemical, and some kids do add things to their vape that's even worse
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
the way it comes out originally. It's not a very highly regulated kind of industry at this point yet, even though
Yeah.
it is getting towards that, right? It's becoming more regulated. But the general rule is it's not healthy to inhale things into your lungs. not the vaping and not the cigarettes. Cigarettes are probably, yeah, worse, but because we don't have all the data, we can't say vaping's the same or worse or better. So we just like warning against vaping and trying to discourage it. And again, one of the concerns very early on that the industry was having was like, is vaping leading to other kind of drug usage and drug exposure and kind of like watering down or lessening or desensitizing young people from smoking cigarettes or from smoking marijuana, other things. And so, um, where I'm concerned, I discourage it. I don't encourage it. I never tell a patient, hey, in order to stop smoking, why don't you vape better? I don't do that because there are actual nicotine inhalers that don't inhale aerosols into your lungs that are safer if you want to stop smoking cigarettes. There's gum, there's patches, nicotine patches. And so there's other things that you could use that vaping is not required.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's unhealthy enough. And we know, I suspect there's a suspicion that the data is not going to be good.
Right.
So even though, okay, I have to say it may be a step up from, cigarettes. It may be,
Right.
but we don't recommend it.
But it's not a big
something that we
step up.
No, not at all. And there's a lot we don't know. So it may not be a step up. So
Right.
we'll see.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
All right. So the last topic that I kind of wanted to dive into was, because again, back to that idea, old Christianity is if somebody has ADHD, pray for the kid, pray that demon out of them. If the kid has Tourette's, it's a demon taking over their brain and they're making them blurt out things. So there's obviously a balance. The brain is an organ like anything else. It can become sick. So the question is, number one, how do you know when someone has to be spiritually delivered or medically treated?
That's a great question. And I think it hits to the heart of a lot of the stigma that there is in church, right? With mental illness and psychiatry in general. And I think that ignorance is an important impediment to people getting the help that they need, right? So just because you don't know what psychiatry is, doesn't mean that it's bad or that it's not spiritual, and so I would encourage people to get educated, number one, especially pastors that have to deal with these kind of issues and ministers in church. Get educated, learn more, ask more questions, things like what we're doing today. Talk to psychiatrists, pick their brains about things, and know when to refer. So first of all, not a whole lot of people need to be spiritually delivered, right? So like what we talk about spiritual oppression or demonizing or possession, like The Exorcist and things like that, like people envision when somebody is possessed by the devil and making them do things and controlling their body and making their head spin and all that kind of stuff. That's very interesting in movies, but it's not realistic in life. Most people, are just struggling. Most people have challenges, life challenges. And unfortunately, a lot of the mental disorders that we treat have inheritance patterns, right? So like, just like alcoholism, diabetes, heart disease, these are things that we understand that have, like we were talking about before, the Bible talks about generational curses, and we talk about like genetic inheritance, right? And so, if your dad's a diabetic, you got to go easy on the sweets, right? If your dad has cardiovascular disease, you got to keep track of your cholesterol and that kind of stuff because, again, you have the same genes as dad and mom. And so, when we talk about breast cancer, we look into a person's history to see if mom or grandma or somebody else had breast cancer.
Yeah.
And mental illness is no different. So there's an inheritance pattern.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that we look at. It's very, very, interesting when you're looking to diagnose somebody or you're evaluating somebody that may have a mood disorder, and you want to look at the signs and the symptoms, and you want to look for triggers and stressors and, different behaviors. But you also want to look at the family history.
Right.
9 times out of 10, if there's no family history, I doubt my own assessment if it leads me to something that is not in the family history. I'm like, well, I may be looking at something a little different than what I'm thinking. Let me
Right.
look further. But you know, it's prevalent in our society now. We were talking about early off camera that schizophrenia is like less than, I think, 1% of the population. Mood disorders less than 2% of the population. Anxiety disorders maybe gets up to like 20% of the population suffer from some kind of anxiety disorder. And so mental illness is not as prevalent as you know, some people would like to think, but it is out there. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about ADHD, for example, most kids are, you know, pushing boundaries, you know, and most boys, a lot of boys have trouble sitting still in class for more than 15 minutes, you know, and girls have that happen to them also. Kids that
So medicate him.
right,
So just
exactly.
give him a ton of drugs to make him like a zombie, so he can't
Yeah,
actually
no.
listen to class.
And you know, and also like if your kid has a diet high in sugars and, you know, sweets and the nutrition is questionable, you know, they may have what would look like mood symptoms,
Right.
but they're just crashing from the high sugar diet that they have, and then they're coming back up after they had another donut and they're, you know, excited. So we got to be very careful with kids. Their brain is not completely developed yet. It's still unfolding. And so you could see a lot of stuff going on, a lot of reactivity, you know. So with kids, you have to be very careful, and you really have to be very accurate.
Yeah.
And you have to, you know, obviously see the kid, but then you have to question parents, you know. And then we ideally, like, especially when we're diagnosing ADHD, we like to also survey the teachers and people in the kid's life. And we want to see some consistency in different settings. So if at home, the parents are describing some behavior, at school, the teachers are describing behavior. And in other settings, for example, at church Sunday school, you know, they're seeing same behaviors. Then we're seeing something that most adults are noticing. It's probably something that is real, that is there. Now we got to decipher what is there. Is it behavioral? Is it parenting? Right? And
Yeah.
there's different styles of parenting that are more productive and conducive to good behaviors. There are other styles of parenting that are not conducive to good behaviors. And so there's a lot to talk about that parenting research. But you have to be very careful, because once you diagnose a kid with a mental illness, or anybody for that matter,
Yeah.
and you start intervening with their
Medically,
neurochemistry, you start prescribing, and you know, you have to be on pretty solid ground. So it's not something that you should do flippantly.
Right.
You know, you should exhaust all the possibilities, rule out things that are not going on, and try to, you know, kind of get a consistency between all the adults, and then before you go there. You know, when I talk about kind of like spiritual phenomenon, you know, that's when you start seeing things that may be a little bit darker. Like you might start seeing more violence. Maybe you see cutting. Maybe you see, you know, recurring thoughts or ideas of death or dying. You know, in this
Could these spiritual aspects be fueled by the genre of music that these kids are listening to?
100%. So there's different gateways to get into our brain, right? So gateways I call like doors that allow influences or spirits, like what you're talking about, to get on. And music is a very powerful one.
Yeah.
So when we're listening to music, when kids are listening to music, they kind of lay down their defenses, their natural defensive, conscious defenses. They kind of lay them down, and they become very susceptible to the noise, the words that are being, you know, and because it's their brain that is receiving this, they begin to personalize it, and they begin to become
it's not
one with it.
It's not necessarily who they are. It's what they're allowing to
Correct.
change them, and what they're allowing.
Correct. And in that setting, from a spiritual standpoint, we call it opening doors to spirits and influences that then can, again, enslave the kid and torment the kid. So when we're getting the history, we're asking about that. We're talking about what movies do they watch? What kind of music do they listen to? What are their conversations like? Who do they talk to? Because we're trying to get, you know, is this something that is purely mental illness or brain dysfunction or neurochemistry, or has there been some doors, some gates open to spiritual entities or influences that could be impacting the kid's thought life, right? And it impacts their thought life. It begins to impact their behavior. And so a lot of children, you see cutting and self-harm behaviors and experimentation with drugs and So you see a lot of things. But again, spiritual kind of possession and that kind of stuff is very rare. It has a different kind of feel or sense to it than just straight up mental illness. And most psychiatrists are not trained in that, obviously, and most pastors aren't trained in psychiatric mental illness disorders, whatever. So pastors tend to say, well, he's got a spirit, he's got a demon, whatever.
Salem witch trials.
Yeah. And the psychiatrist, will say, well, it's all mental illness, but we are physical, emotional, and spiritual beings.
Yeah.
So any one of those systems could become sick.
Right.
And if any one of those systems becomes sick or out of order, we can suffer illness from that. And so it's very important to get a skilled psychiatrist or educated pastor that knows and is aware of these things to be able to do, like I said, a thorough, comprehensive evaluation before you slap a diagnosis on a kid. And so, ADHD is very common. It's very popular. And it's easier as a parent to say, my kid has an issue
Than to deal with it.
Instead of saying, I'm the issue.
Right. The parent's the issue.
I got to change my parenting style. I got to be more available.
Yeah.
I got to show up more, or I got to say no more often to my kid, or my discipline technique is not working, or maybe the school setting needs to be improved. Maybe, so there's all these kind of things that we talk about, like behaviorally, that could be adjusted. And even for kids that do have ADHD, there are things that you can teach them to help them cope with ADHD that doesn't require medication.
Right.
Now, for the more moderate to severe cases of ADHD that are true ADHD, if you don't intervene, they will intervene themselves. And what does that look like? An untreated ADHD adolescent would generally begin to experiment with drugs because they're looking, and the way they tell me, the kids, they say, like, I want to feel normal. Like, I want to be like that person. I want to be like that person. Like, they feel like they're constantly standing out in a very bad, negative way. They want to go with the flow. They want to be popular. They want to be in. They want to get along with their parents. But because they're always intrusive, people like rejecting them, pushing them away. The parents are always criticizing them. They're getting the bad grades. They're falling behind. They're not understanding the material like the other kids. So they say, and so when they try drugs, that anxiety is quelched a little bit. That kind of distraction, lack of focus, whatever, is kind of quelched a little bit. So they tell me the reason I do the drug is because it makes me feel normal.
Right. And so you were saying that off camera again. We had so many good conversations off camera, but one of those people that didn't know if he needed medical attention or if he needed spiritual deliverance or just a behavioral change came up to you for anxiety and
So like I said, our goal as physicians in general are to improve people's quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's quality of life may not be CEO level. Their level may be lower management level, but we want to get them there. If they're CEO level, we want to get them there, right? So whatever their highest potential is, we want to help them achieve that highest potential. That's what a doctor should do. That's what the goal should be. And so when people come to me, they say they're suffering from anxiety. Anxiety is kind of like fever, right? So there's a lot of things that cause fever. You can't just assume, they have fever, this is what's going on. So when someone comes to me complaining about anxiety, I want to know what the nature of that anxiety is, when it started, what triggered it, what didn't trigger it, what made it better. So I start asking a series of questions. And generally speaking, like this individual we're talking about, he had gotten himself into a situation that he was facing a legal trouble, right? So he's facing legal trouble. And in that case, his symptoms were appropriate for what the fix he was in.
Right.
And so in that case, my explanation to him was, look, if your hand's on the stove and the stove is hot and you start to feel pain, I'm not going to give you medication so that you don't feel pain and leave the hand on the stove.
Right. So then you lose your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That pain is a signal that you got to do something, which means move your hand off the stove.
Right.
So that's appropriate change. So in this case, your anxiety is so that you're accountable for what you did, you make restitution, and you face up to what you did. And when you do that, your anxiety will improve. But in this case, you don't need medications. And I think he followed my advice. He did it. He took care of it, and it was better. His anxiety was better. So sometimes anxiety is a signal that something in our life is out of order.
Right.
Something in our life is not right. And the treatment is not continue with the disorder and take this medication.
Right. To dull the pain. That's why people turn to alcohol abuse and drug abuse is
Right.
because they don't want to live with the depression
Right.
or the anxiety of which is the fruit of
Exactly.
what they
Disorder.
found, right, of disorder of what they found themselves in.
Yeah. So in this case, like put things in order. So I tell people all the time, buy an agenda. Like, do you put things in your calendar? Like, do you write things down on your notes?
Structure.
Like, organize yourself or stop overcommitting. Say no more often than yes. Once you get in order, we'll have a secondary or tertiary visit. And if they continue to have anxiety, if they continue to have problems sleeping, or they continue to kind of maybe lose weight because their appetite's horrible, or they're having like panic symptoms, or if they continue to have stuff, then I may consider, treating that because other things are in order. So I have had men come to me and say, I started having real bad anxiety 6 months ago. Well, how was life before then? Well, life was great. My marriage was great. Everything was perfect. Well, what happened 6 months ago?
Bought a house I couldn't afford.
No, I had an affair. My wife caught me.
Oh, worse.
That'll do it.
That'll
I had an
cause you
affair.
lose the house.
Yeah, there you go.
Or my wife caught me having the affair. My anxiety got really bad. I go, well, in this case,
Good.
your anxiety is actually normal, right? So,
Yeah.
which means like you let things kind of get out of hand. You kind of, whatever. And in this case, this person was a Christian. He had gotten away from church a year ago. He got rolled into business, started making a lot of money, started, spending a lot of time at the job place, whatever, neglecting the family, the home, the wife, whatever. Got involved in an affair, and the wife found out. And so his spirituality was compromised. His family was compromised. There's so many things in his life that were compromised. And now the wife was starting to divorce, so he's going to lose his family. Then she's going to take half of everything he owns. So like now his workplace, his money is going to, so he had real bad anxiety. So in this case, I didn't give him medications. I kind of worked with him over a couple of months, kind of teaching him how to get things back in order, how to bring restitution, how to restore. Then I met with his wife and him, and we kind of talked through things, whatever. And there's always restoration. And the promise of God is like, no matter how many times we fail, if we repent, God is going to restore us and bring us back. And that's the promise that we have as Christians. So it's really cool when I work with Christians because I have all my tools on the table, But even if I'm working with somebody that's not a Christian, that may describe themselves as an atheist or agnostic, like I'm able to help them connect the dots, and bring restoration to a level that, they had prior to the thing that caused the anxiety. So, it's not, so a lot of, you can't chat GBT, mental illness treatment or, diagnosis or whatever. It's very complicated. And like George was saying earlier, everybody's different. There's no two people whose depression looks the same. There's no two people whose anxiety looks the same. So it's a doctor's job, if they're having integrity in the process, to ask the right questions. And that's what we're trained in. We're trained in to ask the right questions, to look for the right signs, to look for the, thought patterns, behavioral patterns, to be able to know, okay, this is true mental illness, this is a spiritual. If it's a spiritual situation, it's identified promptly as a spiritual situation. I talked to people and I said, have you spoken to your pastor? Have you spoken to the elders? How they prayed? Where are you at with that? Are you able to read the Bible? Are you doing your devotions and that kind of stuff? And just making sure that people have the hedges up, right? To protect from, like we were talking about, spiritual influences. And it's not uncommon that we're able to identify a door that was opened that allowed that, to come in, whether it's, a movie or
It was just yoga.
pornography.
Yeah, it's just yoga.
It was just a downward dog.
Yeah.
So we call
I
it
did a downward dog. I got anxiety.
yeah, it's terrible, but
Right.
it's like, sometimes it's like the elephant in the room,
Right.
and they're still searching for a why.
Yeah.
The why. And sometimes our job is so easy because it's just like, dude, look at the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't see that?
Just help them point.
Yeah. And so a lot of times a pastor could do that. A minister could do that. We have to be honest with our people and call, like, kind of like, we always say in the church, like, we're kind of like referees sometimes. We're calling strikes and balls. Like, when call strike. Don't beat
Right.
around the bush. Call
Yeah.
it what it is, because it helps the person, right? Come to terms with what's going on and hopefully make life changes. And then the church is also there to support them as they make their changes, whether it's financial assistance or maybe marital counseling. The church is there for that. But for the very, very small percentage of people that do have mental illness, pastors, ministers need to know when to refer
Yeah.
and feel good about it. Not feel condemned or like, oh, I'm not a good pastor because I didn't cast that demon out. Like, feel good about it, because I have had cases where pastors did not refer and the kid has gone home and killed himself.
Wow.
And so That, of course, is worst case scenario. But, you know, there are people, probably a very small percentage of any given congregation, you know, that have mental illness and need professional help.
Yeah.
And so, but refer.
Absolutely. In the topic of faith, doubt, and deconstruction, studies show that 1 in 3 practicing Christians have gone through some form of faith deconstruction. And what do you think is driving that trend amongst men in the church?
You know, that's a great question. It's a very interesting question. And I always tell people, like, I'm a clinician primarily, which means that I actually treat people, and I don't live like I don't do a lot of theology or theory. I used to be a professor, and it rubbed me so wrong that we're going from meeting to meeting and we're giving lectures and teaching whatever, but I didn't feel like we're making like an impact on families' lives, you know? So like, I'm a clinician, I treat people sitting in front of me. And so we were talking about earlier, like everybody's different, you know? And whenever somebody throws out statistics, they're important because they give us some level of understanding of like phenomenon patterns that are going on. And I don't completely dismiss them, but I'm like sitting in front of somebody, talking to them and addressing like where they're at. And there's any number of things that challenge our faith, you know, and we even see that with pastors and people that, or spiritual leaders or mentors of ours, you know, that come to this time in their life where they have to confront their belief system and their belief processes and whatever. And sometimes God challenges our theology and calls us to take it up a notch, to take it up another level. And he does that by bringing us trials and tribulations. And one of the things I think, like the verse that we read earlier, that God's not ever going to give you something that you can't handle. He's never going to take you to a place of temptation that you're not going to handle.
Right.
And so, but God does bring trials and tribulations to our lives. And a lot of Christians, they don't understand why God took somebody from their life, why God allowed something to happen. You know, it could be a traumatic, catastrophic event, and they're not able to connect the dots. But I personally, and if you've lived any amount of time at all, you would have gone through something that has challenged your faith. At that moment, you know, you have, you know, a couple of options. One of them is to throw in the towel and quit. And we all have the ability to do that. You know, this is your prerogative, right?
Yeah.
It feels like the easy way out, right? Like, I don't have to deal with that. I don't have to go face the brothers in the church. I don't have to explain. I don't have to understand. People in church are opinionated. They tell you this, that. So like, it seems like it's an easy way out to just like throw in the towel and just walk away from it all. But I think, and what happened to me was that I really had to rethink my theology. I mean, if you grew up in the United States of America as a Christian, you got it too good, you know, and you think you deserve to have it too good.
Yeah.
You think you have a right to have it good because you're a good Christian, girl at church, you go to church 3 times a day. Like, you have all these things that you're doing for God, and God is so grateful for you, and like you're like saving the world, and the pastor should be so appreciative.
God is so grateful for you.
Yeah, because, you know, you're tithing and you think you're all that, whatever. And then when that theology gets challenged, it's catastrophic.
Right.
It's very, very hard, you know? And so when that was challenged in my life, I had to like sit down and literally, I started reading the Bible again. It felt like for the first time. It looked different. It sounded different. I learned new things that were another level from where my understanding was before. But, you know, I had a great Christian wife. I still have a great Christian wife. I've been married 30 years, but she was there for me at that moment in my life. I had great parents. I had a great brother. I had a great church. I had the support system that at that moment kind of absorbed my situation and helped me get to the other side. But it was a real personal, intimate one-on-one with God, revamping my whole theology. Now, I've been in the church since I was 14 years old, so I knew it all.
Right.
You know, I went to all kinds of conferences and family conferences, and I studied psychology, and I studied psychiatry, and I'm a pastor, so I had all the answers. I knew it all. People come to me, I would give them an answer. You know, I knew it all. But when God touched my life in the most dramatic way, in a very hard way, my knees shook and my faith was challenged. And I think we're all going to go through that.
Yeah.
You know, we're all going to suffer through that. And I think God's purpose, like it says in James, is to get us to the other side. better, more patient, more persevering, with more love, with more empathy, more understanding,
Resilient.
resilient.
Yeah, with
and-
more faith in God too, because once you go through something
100%.
and God takes you out of it, for
Yeah.
the next one that goes through is like, I don't know how I'm gonna make it out of this one. But what he did last time was pretty incredible. So
Yeah.
I guess if he did it that time, he could do it
Yeah.
again.
And I think the person that we can really look to and really say, if God did it with him, he 100% can do it with me. It's Job.
Yeah.
Job really went through the worst of the
Yeah.
worst that anyone can ever
Yeah.
go through,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, not for any reason that he even knew about either.
He was
Right.
like, oh, I talked to the devil about it, and he put me up on
Yeah, and all his friends were like, "You must have sinned. You must have done something." And Job had
Absolutely.
no idea what was going
He was
on.
clueless. Yeah.
clueless. But through it all, he was able to have a more resilient faith and, leaning more into God. And I think that's powerful. I think if there's something like that in our lives, we
Yeah.
have to lead into that, and that God,
And at that time, let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you something. At that time, I thought I was losing my mind, because you do feel like that. Because like when everything that you know and you believe to be true is challenged, like you feel like, you're losing. That's what it feels like. People say like, I feel like I'm losing my mind. You feel like you're going crazy. And I resorted to praying, reading scripture. My wife was praying for me. I was praying in my prayer language, speaking in tongues all the time, because I didn't want my own thoughts to kind of get too stuck in my brain. So
you kept renewing your mind.
yeah,
Like-
I was praying in tongues.
Right. You don't
And-
even have the words to what you need.
Yeah, and if I thought something, it was Jesus, 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 Jesus. Why would I do that? To block out the thoughts of like, oh my God, I'm losing my home. I'm losing this, my career, my this, my that, my that, my that. Like, so those thoughts were, so I'm
And
just Jesus,
you have
Jesus,
children.
Jesus.
You have children too that depend on you.
Yeah, 4 kids. I had 4 kids.
Was this during medical
yeah.
school?
Yeah. No, it was after medical school.
After medical school?
Yeah. And so, have you ever noticed you can't have 2 thoughts at the same time? So when one thought is like, and I tell people, my patients, this is right, and this is part of cognitive behavioral therapy, like when you're thinking something that is negative and like dark and like whatever, you could insert even just saying Jesus in your thought life, just saying Jesus in your thoughts. You're thinking Jesus,
Yeah.
it blocks out that thought.
Right.
So it can't come in. And in no time flat, that thought's gone. It was just trying to plant a seed there,
That's a practical application of
Yes.
removing whatever thoughts that you have.
Yes.
Yeah,
And so
that's good.
reading scripture aloud, like when you read scriptures out loud, there's nothing that's going to come in while you're doing that. And so if you're a Christian, you're going to go through something like that. I believe probably the percentage that you talked about is probably greater in American Christians than, for example, in Somali Christians
Oh yeah, no, like this.
who wake up every morning and could live their life that day.
Yeah,
These people are not questioning their faith and falling away from the faith or anything like their life are on the line every single day, and their faith is as strong as ever.
Right.
And so that's a very American thing, kind of thing. But like, not to judge or not to whatever, but I
Yeah.
would like to sit with that person and talk with them and see like where things went south.
and I think when it comes to those moments of doubt, it's important to surround yourself with a support system and other believers that you respect. And I think nowadays men, they don't really have those close friends that they can talk to. Why do you think men today are lonelier than they ever have been?
Yeah, remember the ultimate goal of the devil. So I call it like, so the devil puts a wedge, right? So he'll find any reason to put a wedge between you and your relationships and the people in your life that are going to be a blessing to you, but he'll rarely open the door and bring people in that are going to lead you the wrong way. No wedges there. Like those are the people that always show up, your best buddies who are leading you the wrong way. But with people that are good people in your life, that are a blessing, that are holding you accountable, that really care about you, the devil's going to find any little thing to put a wedge in there, and then he's going to separate you. And then he's going to isolate you. And so those are the oldest tricks of the devil, and he does it still today. So I always tell people, just show up.
Yeah.
Just show up. Like
Regardless of how you feel.
regardless of how you feel, regardless of what you did, regardless if you relapse, whatever, just show up. Because as long as you show up, the devil's not going to have his way. He's not going to isolate you. He's not going to separate you. He's not going to isolate you. And it's not going to go down the road that we talked about to depression and suicidality. So, I think that what we're talking about, we have too many toys, too many devices, that we're living a fantasy kind of delusion. We're living in this fake world of streaming video and Netflix and all this other kind of stuff, and having real life human relationships, which many times are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
because I don't like your hair today, because you dress funny, because you gained a little bit of weight,
Yeah.
because those shoes are old, you add a style, and like people have opinions, people have ideas. And so it rubs off a little comfortable. When I don't like something I'm watching on TV, I just fast forward, change the channel. But you
Right.
can't do that in real life,
No.
you know?
Yeah.
And in video games, especially, what happens in video games when you don't like, when you change it, when you die, you just restart and you start again, whatever. So men are living in this kind of pseudo delusional kind of world, and they're abandoning their real life relationships because they don't want to pay a price. I call it throwing in the towel. And as a dad and as a husband, one of the things I promised my wife and my kids many, many years ago is like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong. I don't know if I said it too harshly or if I said it not harshly enough, but I'm not going to throw in the towel. You guys will enjoy this story. So I have a person comes to my office. He's an alcoholic, full blown alcoholic. Okay. And I work hard to get him sober. And when he gets sober, his wife leaves him. She's been living with an alcoholic for more than 20 years. He gets sober, his wife leaves him.
She was the one selling him the alcohol.
Why did she leave him?
She fell in love with the alcoholic.
Well, because the alcoholic doesn't bother you. He doesn't comment. He doesn't opine. He's not around. He's locked in his room. He's not.
She fell in love with the alcoholic.
So she's running the house. She's running the kids. She's buying, selling, doing whatever she wants, whatever. And this guy doesn't have an opinion otherwise. All of a sudden, he starts kind of like,
Wait a minute.
wait a minute. I'll take the kids. Wait, why are we doing this? Let's not do that. Wait. And he starts like giving opinions and getting involved and being in their face and maybe being rude, maybe being angry, maybe being harsh, not perfect. And I told wives, look, it's going to take some time before we kind of clean it up a little bit, but guaranteed he's going to be a much better husband than he ever has. But the wife doesn't tolerate
It was too abrupt for
the
her
opinionated
liking.
husband.
Yeah.
And so she would rather not have it. And so she leaves him. And that's happened to me a couple times. And so, as husbands, as fathers, we have to be there. We have to be involved. We have to be in people's faces. We have to be around. Pastor Kenny always says, how do you spell love for kids? It's Time, right?
Yeah.
Spending time. There's no such thing as like what we used to say, it's not quantity, it's quality of time. No, it's both. It's quality and quantity of time.
Right.
You got to pay a price. You got to sacrifice. You got to be there for your kids, be there for your wife, be involved. It may not be pretty sometimes. It may be loud. It may be confrontational sometimes, but that's good.
Yeah.
Be involved and don't check out. And if you don't check out and if you're involved, you'll have a much, much more colorful and fulfilled life than if you disengage like a lot of men tend to do. Go back into their caves.
Yeah. Stop telling your kids, go ask your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, go to tell, take the reins, and have an opinion. Well, whatever you want, but honey, no, you have an opinion. Make a decision. It's easy to just say whatever you want, but if you actually have an opinion, it's what you're called to do.
It takes effort. If you want to cultivate, from my experience, if I want to cultivate a healthy relationship with my wife, I have to be there.
Yeah.
I have to understand her wants. I have to understand her needs.
Yes. And it's not always perfect.
No.
Because you're a rookie, right? You've never done this
I'm a
before.
rookie.
So I stick my foot in it all the time. Like, I've never done this before.
I'm a third year
What,
rookie.
you
Yeah.
trusted me?
But if you throw in the towel just because you didn't do it right, and a lot of times our wives are like, give me that. You don't know how to do it. Like, it's really easy to say, okay, fine, I'm going to go watch TV. Say, no. How do you do it? Like, show me. Like,
Right.
how do you do it better? But stay engaged, stay involved, stay in their faces.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it'll forge the family. It'll create unity. It'll create a bond that is necessary.
There's respect in there. We crave respect.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's in there. That's
Yeah.
bundled in
And it
there.
does take time, and because we just drove from 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work. We get home at 7
Yeah.
o'clock at night, and then they're asking for an opinion, and it's hard to be like, this. I feel bad. I'm guilty of it. Vicky's like telling me something, and I'm like kind of doze off, and she's like, "What do you think about that?" I'm just like, "Well, what do you think about it?" Like, I get caught because I wasn't paying attention, but
Yeah.
you have to make the effort. You have to just
And I always tell people, like, it's not going to be perfect, but it gets better.
right.
So you're going to mess up 20,000 times, but don't throw in the towel. Keep trying. You'll get it right
Yeah,
eventually.
So back to the friends, Christian men having friends. Would you say having a brotherhood and someone you can speak to on a daily basis is essential to being a Christian in Christianity? Because I think back to the disciples and they had each other.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? So like, okay, so when we talk about somebody like going from like an addiction or going from like a mental illness to like getting back to a level of function that they're able to thrive in the adult world and do well and have success in the adult world. And that means being employable or financially providing for yourself, your family, and being able to maintain relationships, healthy relationships in your life, whatever. Like we call it recovery, right? So like that's recovery. So it necessarily a healthy male does not need, BFFs or friends or like, long weekends with the buddies, that's not something that we need, we are into ourself. We have everything that we need to be able to function at a very high level and do well and succeed, and be there for our wives and whatever. So I would say like in the hierarchy of needs, I think that is something that should be there, but I don't think it's absolutely a necessity unless you're going through a season in your life that you need that support.
Right.
And so, yeah, then you're deep in, and you're deep in and you're accountable and you're calling every day or whatever. But that's if you're going through a season where you need the extra support. We call it a higher level of support, And so you do need that in that season of your life. But I don't think outside of your relationship with your wife and your children, that you need that. I think
that brotherhood should not supersede your first.
Oh, no. And a lot of men like use that as an excuse. And so, so then women also say, well, then I need my BFFs.
I got to go to Europe with the girls.
Yeah, now I got to whatever. So now everybody needs friends, and then your kids need their friends. And so I think it's been overblown. It's I don't know if this is controversial or not, but the healthy male does not need that.
Yeah, he doesn't need the weekend with the golf with the boys, whatever. It's more to eat garbage, and it is beneficial. Yeah.
But people that are struggling, people that are having a hard time may need increased level of support.
Yeah.
But as men, I almost want to say like, okay, I don't know if this is a correct phrase. You guys could correct me or modify whatever, but I feel like a man is a franchise into itself. He provides, he protects. He's the one that is lifting people up and protecting people. And, so when I go to church, and this has been for many years, it's not because I'm a pastor now. When I go to church, I don't go to church like saying, what am I going to get?
Yeah.
Pastor, what are you going to do for me today? Like I go to church looking at you, looking at something that I can bless somebody with or encourage somebody or hug somebody or whatever. I don't need it necessarily.
Right.
But when I do that, when I reach out to bless somebody and help somebody, I realize that I get more off of that than when I'm seeking for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what is true is James 3:16. If you want to read it, James 3:16, I think that this is what we have to be very, very careful with. When we get so internally focused to our needs, I think this is a risk that we take. And I think society is moving in that direction. What are my needs? Are my needs being met? Am I getting what I need? Go ahead.
Yeah, for where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice.
Yeah, so in some versions it kind of says self-interest, or like when you're looking to get yours, when you're looking to get your own and whatever, and that's your dynamic, even in your relationship with your wife, in your relationships with your friends and with your children, when you're looking to get your own and that's where your thought life is and where your mindset is, my needs aren't being met. My needs, what are like you need to check that.
Yeah. For where jealousy and self-interest exists, there will be disorder in every evil thing. Yeah, I get what you're saying. You're saying like you've come to a point that you're you're in your 50s, right? You've been a Christian for a long time. You have gotten to the point where you are now pouring out. But if there's a moment for early Christians that they're heavily in need, they're leaving their support system in the world, they need, men like you to be there, and they're more needy. But the goal is for them to come to a place where they become the real man of God, that they then become the mentors.
Exactly. So when I get somebody like that, what is my goal? Is my goal to make them my best buddy so they could be next to me for the rest of my life?
If he has a nice boat, yes.
That's true.
It's true.
I just got to clean it.
My goal is to get into a place where they are dependent on Christ,
right,
and functional, and full of God and Christ, and able to then pour out. And that's what the Bible talks about fruit, right? Fruit is not something that you consume on your own. Fruit is something that people are able to pick off your life and be blessed by.
Yeah.
So recovery is that. Recovery is like you are in a season where you need that one-on-one, you need that structure, you need that support, whatever, but it's not to stay there.
Right.
So when men have been in the church for 15, 20, 30 years and still need that,
Yeah, there's no growth. It's not genuine.
I guess the question wasn't in that sense.
I know it wasn't, but I wanted to address that.
No, because it's true. Because even to
I
what you said about
understand, I
the
understand what
disciples.
he's saying because, oh, my boys, I got to hang out with the boys. I got to hang out with the boys. I get it.
The best thing that happened to the disciples is Jesus left.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly
See,
what he addressed.
That's when they grew up.
Yeah.
When Jesus left and they like
They separated.
that's when the Holy Spirit came and empowered them, and Peter became the tremendous preacher, and everybody was like out there, and everybody was, so that to me is a man.
Can you say that again? The best moment for the disciples?
Yeah, is when Jesus left them, right? That's when their true selves were challenged. Their you could call it like their safety net,
Yeah.
their support structure.
And the Bible says that the Holy Spirit was sent, which then empowered them to do the things.
Yes, and they did it.
Right.
And Peter took it to another level, John to another level, James they all took it to another level, And what was interesting is this, is when the church started to be persecuted, they all went back to that coddling and huddling and hiding, And then when Paul got saved, Paul's like, what are you guys doing? You guys got to go. I'm going to go. You guys got to go. Then Paul went and he preached and he was stoned and he was killed and he was persecuted.
Shipwrecked twice.
He was shipwrecked, whatever, but he was out there. He wasn't looking for his band of brothers.
Yeah.
He wasn't looking for buddies to fulfill his needs, to like whatever. So you have to be very careful with that because, there is a season, for that. There is a season when
you're being discipled.
Yeah, you're being discipled, but a true, if I was discipling somebody, it would not be for that person to become dependent on me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or anybody
Right.
except Jesus.
Right.
And so by the time I finish discipling that person, their relationship with God is stronger, their relationship with Christ is stronger, and now they're blessing other people, and then I'm nothing.
It's like parenting.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so do you need that? And, whatever, but we're erring right now in this generation, in this season of Christianity, like men need to step up and be men and be that protective provider, kind of whatever, and stop like looking to fulfill and gratify
for somebody to-
which is good for my follow-up question. Why are so many men, Christian men, delaying or avoiding marriage today? Is it fear, culture, or is it something deeper?
Yeah, so the theory is that in the United States of America, adolescence is being extended. So it's what it is. It's when you're talking about buddies and friends and playing basketball and going fishing, whatever, like people don't want to commit and pay the price and settle down and
let go.
And let go and be home with the wifey and deal with her.
So the spirit of selfishness is more prevalent.
Yes, 100%. And the Bible says that. The Bible says in the end times, in last days, men will become lovers of self. And so that heart, which was the example Jesus gave us, that he paid a price, he gave his life so that we then now could live, so that we can flourish, so that we can prosper in our own lives, whatever. Like that sacrifice, that pain, like giving your life for the benefit of others, we said that was lost a couple of generations ago. And so a lot of people are very self-centered, very into themselves, very much looking into how they can prosper and grow and whatever. And sometimes a wife and kids are not in that equation. But you know what's interesting? Like women are doing the same thing. So it's not only men now it's women doing that. And
they no longer need men. Yeah. Men think they no longer need women, and women think they no longer need
Right.
men. They can provide for themselves, and they can.
Yeah, like
do what
giving
they
your
need.
life for him, giving your life for her. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna have kids, bro. Look at my boat. Look at my car. Look at you with the kids driving
Yeah.
And so men don't want to pay the price. I think men don't want to. I think that there's trepidation, there's fear. What I hear from young men is like, you'll hear things like, oh, the housing prices are too high. The interest rates are too high. Or like, the
refinance.
Yeah. Well, we have people, here in Miami, we have people coming to Miami every day from Cuba and from Haiti and from all over the world that don't speak the language. don't have the
Figure
education.
it out, man.
So how and they live and they
Yeah.
have apartments, they have houses, they
Yeah.
pay bills, and how could somebody that was born and raised in this country that has the education and the parental support and church support not be able to? So to me, I think it's fear.
Yeah, and it's also because they're being told that over and over again online. The American dream is dead. You're not going to be able to buy a house. You're not going to be able to. Your degree is meaning less and less nowadays. So if you tell somebody that enough, they believe it. So, we're pretty much getting almost to 3 hours. We can continue to discuss for the next 20 hours, right? But I feel like we should be closing up.
Get me another
very soon.
coffee.
You good for one more question?
Get me another coffee.
You good for one more question?
Yeah,
We'll do one last question, then we'll jump
question.
into rapid fire.
Okay.
Okay.
Being that we're new fathers, we just started.
Yes.
3 years into this.
How can 6 months, marriage 3 years.
Well, yeah. Right.
How many months are you?
5 months with the baby.
5 months.
5 months with the newborn. How can fathers balance the crushing weight of being providers, husbands, and spiritual leaders without burning out?
That's a great question. That is also another thing that we see that not only fathers but ministers, right? Pastors, they're experiencing this burnout. And what does that feel like? What's burnout, right? So what does that mean? That's kind of like it's kind of what we call like layman terms for kind of like almost like a mild depression.
Yeah.
You know, where they feel like exhausted, they have no energy, they feel fatigued, they feel overwhelmed. One of the aspects of depression is having a challenge stand in front of you, and instead of like attacking it and going at it, like when you're excited about life, you're passionate about life, you kind of roll up into fetal position and feel overwhelmed because it's just too much, it feels like. And so we're talking about like mild to moderate symptoms of depression that may or may not need to be medicated, but definitely is a sign that you have mismanaged your life. And so in scripture, there's a lot of advice and a lot of counsel on how to live out our lives in a way that we don't experience burnout, but sometimes we neglect that and we get very involved in work and making money in the career, and we feel pressured to, continue to provide a very high level of support for our families and our friends and our churches. And, the best churches, give their pastors sabbaticals a year at a time, after they've been in for 5 years, they give them a sabbatical. They have certain policies in place that, because it's been happening long enough, and I think we've learned. So now a lot of churches are implementing these things where they're giving their pastors and the family sabbaticals, or they're giving them the support they need, or doing certain things that will prevent them from burnout, including hiring more staff, more support staff, and less kind of a weight on their shoulders as far as the care of the church and the people. And in the homes, I think it's no different. I think that you can get hyper focused on your duties and the things you have to do, and you neglect to take time away from those things with your family. And so life has gotten expensive.
Yeah.
Life has gotten very expensive, and people are working very hard. And so, I tell people all the time, work 6 months, take a week off, take a long weekend, even if it's a long weekend, and people say, well, I don't have the money. I go, look, sometimes for mental health, you might have to like put it on a credit card, and then pay it back over the next 6 months, over the next year, and then take another one,
That's good.
But every job has the number of days that you could take off. You should take advantage of that.
Yeah. Paid
Paid leave, you should take advantage of it. You should take advantage of sick leave. Call it a mental health day. Go play golf. Go fishing. And so I think like you have to implement certain safeguards in your home, in your own life, and create boundaries. We want to be there for everybody, for everything at all times, and that's just not possible.
Yeah.
So you have to get your priorities in order and live in order. And if you live in order, get your priorities in order, it should prevent things like that from happening. And also, like what we're doing today, learn, like these are great questions. Read, learn, pick people's brain, find somebody like myself that's been doing it for a lot of years. Hey, how'd you do it? And then go ask somebody else, hey, how'd you do it? Hey, how'd you do it? What did you do? What'd your wife do? And just kind of learn, be a student, be curious. And what are the signs, like what I call like the red flags that you're kind of getting there or going there? Identify those promptly and do something about it instead of just being casual and lazy about it. Do something about it. And it's not always about spending money, you know. Sometimes it's about just taking a day off of work and staying home, you know, hanging out with your wife, you know, and hanging out with your kids, doing the laundry, you know, one day, or you know, whatever the case may be. But the very practical steps, but just generally an awareness of it, and people in your life that love you and care about you and are able to, like, for your dad, for the bishop, you know, I'm kind of that person. You know, sometimes because we grew up together, we lived in the same room for 20 something years. And so we were very close, and we say things to each other, you know, that maybe we won't tell other people. And so, you know, I'll share about my work, what's going on, where I'm at, whatever. And he'll tell me, look, you gotta be careful with that. Or he may tell me things about that going on with the church or the ministry. What is a man ministry? I say, look, you gotta, you know, this and that. We kind of talk to each other like that.
Right.
And we watch out for each other. And so you have somebody like that in your life, you know, that they can talk with and share with and be open, transparent about, that can kind of help you and call you out. It should be somebody that has life experience, has lived, knows the word of God, you know, and is able to give you solid counsel.
Tells you that you can trust them.
Yeah. I always tell people, look, especially Christian people, so the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy, right? And then in the same verse, the last part of the verse says, but I have come that I have life and have it more abundantly.
Right.
And I tell Christians all the time, you're not living that abundant life, brother. What's going on?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, what's going on? You're not living that abundant life. And it's not money.
Right.
It's just the countenance on your face, the look, the way you relate to people, the way you enjoy life. Like, it's not there. What's going on? You know, and kind of engage in that conversation.
I think one of the leading factors to that burnout is we find ourselves comparing ourselves to other people,
Especially in Miami. But it happens everywhere.
and the abundance that
Especially
they, you know,
Miami.
that we, right. Especially with
Yeah,
with the mega yacht and a helicopter
everybody
landing
has
on
a
top
nicer
of it,
car
and the
than me.
boat has
I don't
a
know
boat,
how.
and yeah,
I can't have
It's
the worst car in
crazy.
Miami, but it seems like it.
so it's just the rat race
Yeah.
of seeing everyone around you, comparing yourself and saying, man, am I doing enough, and wanting to do more. And then we're not realizing that in us wanting to do more and having our family's best interests, we're hurting ourselves. We're, you know, not sleeping. We're not hanging out with family. And that's really what matters. And that rest and recovery.
Yeah, 100%. If you're not sleeping well at night, that's a big red flag.
Yeah.
You know, sleep is God's gift, rest, you know. So you got to be getting 6 to 8 hours restorative sleep every night so you can get up the next day. And, you know, if you're not sleeping well at night, that goes on for a week or two, whatever, that's a big red flag. If you're not doing the things you enjoyed before, like fishing or reading or watching a good movie or going out to dinner or hanging out with your friends or like going to play golf or whatever it is that you used to enjoy, if you haven't done it for like a year, 2 years, that's a red flag.
It sounds like one of the health assessment questions.
Yeah.
When was the last time you
You had pleasure in doing things.
Yeah.
did one of your activities?
Yeah. So there are red flags that you could
Yeah.
identify and you need to move on. But I tell people all the time, I think that, you know, you can manage a very high level of functioning if you keep things in order. Once those things start getting out of order, you start switching your relationship, your intimacy with God, you swap, you put ministry there. You're more engaged, involved, and caring about ministry than you are about your personal, intimate relationship with God. Or when the church or your job starts to take the place of your wife and your family, like when things start getting out of order, that's not sustainable.
Right.
Yeah.
You could go on for 6 months, a year, maybe, but down the road, it's going to fall apart.
Right.
And so you need to be mindful of that. Have your priorities
Yeah.
and keep on top of it.
I can't. What you just said was so good. It's you're what was God in your life could be replaced by ministry, and I didn't even think that ministry could be an idol,
Yeah.
but it could be.
Yeah.
Right. Anything that takes place of where God should be is considered an idol, and that is one of the first Ten Commandments. Don't put anything else above me. So, such a good discussion. I'm gonna do just 2 questions, rapid fire. That means less than 30 seconds to answer this. I'm gonna let you go a little bit further for the first one because it's more for our audience. I've heard too many good stories from you of patients, not names, not details, no HIPAA violations, but experiences that you have that you're a psychiatrist. You've met the most interesting humans probably that ever lived. One story that really stands out that you think that our audience would enjoy.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of, and being a pastor and having that background. So I became Christian when I was 14. And so I got into clinical psychology, then I went to medical school, then I got into psychiatry, and I love to read, and I love to read. I've read a lot of stuff. So, I always filter things through the Word of God, and I try to understand not only the behavioral or scientific or physical, medical, neurotransmitters kind of aspect, but I always try to understand the spiritual aspect of things. And I always try to have my radar on and try to be discerning about what's going on. When I walk into a psychiatric hospital, I try to discern, like, I don't like if there's a spiritual oppression, there's a spiritual situation here. Well, now it has to pause because I'm here, and it's not going to be allowed to do its thing while I'm here, and I'm going to take control of that in the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
And mental illness thing, like nobody's going to be better than me at diagnosing, at treating, whatever. So I try to be an extremely competent psychiatrist because I don't want to not do well for the people I treat. And so I'm very, very mindful, but there are a couple things that have blown my brain that I did not understand.
Right. Can't
And
explain
so-
it scientifically.
Can't explain
or
it.
spiritually.
Can't explain it. But there used to be a show back in the day. It was called The Twilight Zone. And so that's the best way I could describe it. It's like the Twilight Zone. Okay, some happen here that I cannot explain from a biblical perspective or from a psychiatric or medical perspective that just happened that I still don't have an answer for. So one of the stories, I've had a lot of great stories, but I think this is a funny story, and it didn't end up in anybody getting hurt. So I think it's a good story to share. So we had a patient that he was an older gentleman, and his family, he was living alone, and he was sleeping in the backyard. And when the family came and found out they were sleeping in the backyard, not in his apartment, they inquired why. He said, well, because there's people walking around in the roof, in the ceiling between, I guess, the ceiling of the house and the roof. He said those people walking around there, he could hear them at night. And so he had to sleep outside because they were bothering him. And so they moved him to a hotel thinking, well, maybe it's something in the house.
Right.
The pipes are knocking or something. So he moved to a hotel. And in the hotel, he had the same sensation that there's people in the roof, walking around in the roof. So he didn't want to sleep in the hotel. So we call that a delusional disorder, right? He's had this delusion of something that is reality, but it's not reality. So we admit him to the hospital, and I start treating him. And every day he's like, yeah, Dr. Molina, because there's people in the roof, and there's people in the roof. I'm like, look, how are you doing? Did you sleep well? We're giving him the medication. Did you sleep well? Are you doing, trying to see that those delusions kind of temper down a little bit, and he gets better. His countenance changes. He's eating better.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, we admit a patient in the room next to his. And this guy is more of a personality disorder, like antisocial. So he's going to basically go from the hospital. He's going to go to jail because of something that he did. But for right now, he's in the hospital.
It's a Baker Act.
Yeah, he's a Baker Act. He's in the hospital. He's in the room next to this other patient that used to have delusions or had delusions, people on the roof. And so after that day, whatever, we interviewed him, whatever. And so I go home. And when I come back in the morning to the psychiatric hospital, I found out that the antisocial guy tried to escape. So he climbed up into the roof and started crawling across the roof, whatever. And he took a wrong step and fell through the tile of the roof on top of the patient that was in his bed sleeping.
I told you.
Yeah, right.
That was saying there are people in the roof.
Oh my gosh.
And so there was, a bunch of the roof has fallen. There was like stuff all over the place, whatever. And my poor patient that was having delusions of people on the roof, when I met with him that morning, I'm like, okay. Yeah, there are people on the roof.
You're right.
You were right. There's people on the roof. And so partly because we had to repair that room, so we didn't have enough space to keep him or the other antisocial guy. Partly because of that, but also partly because we didn't have a leg to stand on.
Right.
We discharged them because there are people on the roof.
You know what? You're free to go.
So is that crazy? Like, was this guy
What
having
are the
like some kind of
what is
premonition
the
or something that was going to
chances?
happen or something that whatever?
Oh yeah.
And when it happened, he was like,
Told you.
he almost looked
Good.
normal. Like, I told you.
Right.
There's people on the roof were like, yeah, you were right.
It's literally a TV show.
We sent them home with the family.
There you go.
There you
And
go.
that's it. No,
It's
no,
crazy.
nothing to report
Yeah,
after
the
that.
person
No.
Wow.
fell out of the roof. He no
That's
longer
it.
has
He's
issues.
like, told you.
His belief was confirmed.
Take me home.
That's so funny. I just knew we had to share. Like, it's such a crazy story.
Crazy story.
Last question for you, and we'll let you go. For a fellow Christian, you said that there's many times where people are battling things, but they don't know really when to intervene or when to reach out and say, hey, what's going? Is everything okay? Or you just just caught up with work? How can, as a Christian, as a fellow believer, how can I know when a person needs help getting out of a situation or they're in a bad place?
Yeah, that's a great question. Everybody's different, right? So like, there's no cookie cutter kind of way to approach these things. Like, but you always have to, like, don't be scared to ask questions. A lot of people think, well, if I ask them if they relapse, or if I ask them if they're depressed, or if I ask them if they're having thoughts of wanting to die, or I ask them this, like, it's gonna, like, trigger thoughts in them, or it's gonna cause them to move in that direction. Like, that's been bared out that that's not true. That's not the way it works. And so I would say, like, ask questions. Always ask questions. One of the things, even when I got into psychiatry, it was very uncomfortable for me to ask question and shut up. Right? Doesn't that feel awkward?
I had the same problem. Yeah.
Doesn't that feel awkward, what I did just there?
Yeah.
Did you feel awkward?
No.
Okay, so, like,
But
silence,
I get it.
silence makes us feel awkward.
Yeah.
It makes it feel weird because we want to fill the space. We want to act like we know everything we want to know because the Bible says and the verse says, and and we're like, we have like mouth diarrhea sometimes, and it's okay to ask a question and shut up.
Yeah.
And just wait. And then ask another question, ask a follow-up. And then when they give you something, don't continue down your own agenda. Like, follow that. Like, sometimes we come to these situations with our own agenda, what we want to see happen. But for a second, put your agenda aside and be there at that moment with that person and just ask them. And that comes across in a very powerful way. And they're able to, like, almost sense that interest and that care that you have for them, and that you're not doing your own thing. You're not doing your own agenda. They're not just another church person that's coming for advice. And so sit there and ask questions and ask questions and ask questions. And I'm like, I've been doing this for a lot of years, and that's what I do.
It's like Paul when he went to Athens with all the idols that were around him.
Yeah.
Just,
Ask questions.
ask questions.
Ask
Learn
questions.
about them.
Yeah. Ask questions. Ask questions. Ask questions. Ask questions. Ask questions. And then, obviously, there are red flags. And, like, of course, my thing would be, if I had my way, like, every minister and every pastor would be trained in this, but it's not going to happen. But I wish it would.
Yeah, you could start a course.
So, like, there you go. when to, like, refer, right? When to refer. So, if there are, like, physical changes, like if they're losing weight or they're gaining a lot of weight, if they're medically or physically ill for some reason, there's an ailment or illness. If they're, like we said, like, not sleeping for a while, if they're not eating, if they, and I asked the question, do you ever, like, with Christians, you have to be careful, because Christians, they'll say, like, nah, I won't not think about killing myself, because they know, like, a lot of Christians think, well, if I kill myself, this and this, oh no, I'm not gonna kill myself. So I says, if you didn't wake up tomorrow morning, how would you feel about that? And they'll say, I feel fine.
Relieved.
Yeah. Like, if I didn't wake up tomorrow, I'd be great. I'd be fine if I didn't have to wake up tomorrow. Oh my God. Like, that's not normal. I would say that's not the abundant life that God promises us,
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's a red flag.
Right.
That's good, though.
And so if they have family history, you can ask about the dad. You can ask about mom. You can ask about the home environment. If they have a personal history of being diagnosed, treated for mental illness, especially if they have a personal history of cutting, self-harm behavior, or that kind of stuff, you have to get them help. You have to refer. And I even tell people sometimes, like, depending where the case is, people have called me to ask me, and I know they've called your wife, Megan, also, like, and I've even told people, yeah, Baker Act, which in Miami means involuntary commitment to a hospital to get the help, because you don't know if that person goes home tonight, if they're going to be alive the next day. You're kind of at that place.
Yeah.
So you want to escalate it. And
Yeah.
the one way we have to escalate is to get, the police involved and get a Baker Act or involuntary commitment. Being aware of it is important. Not everybody is depressed because they're rebellious. Not everybody is depressed or anxious because they're knuckleheads, hard-headed, rebellious, in sin, living in sin, whatever, And so be sensitive to that, And again, ask questions. And if you could get family involved, like if you get a parent involved or you could get a sibling involved, call them over and say, hey, have you noticed? Have you seen? And get their feedback.
Yeah.
A lot of times people with mental illness don't have 100% objective understanding of how they've been behaving. Like sometimes they don't have that insight, and so you call a family member. Say, oh yeah, he doesn't come out of his room for days. Oh yeah, this is going on. And sometimes the family is able to add, and then once you have the family member there, you're able to tell family member, listen, you need to take them to the hospital, or you need to get professional help.
Yeah.
And hand it off in that way.
Yeah.
And so, but be aware of it. And again, it's the minority, right? So you're gonna have hundreds of Christians come up to you complaining about this, complaining about that. They didn't like the music. They didn't like what the pastor preached. They didn't like the Sunday school. But when that one person comes with that, you need to stop, call time out, and spend the time. That's where you need to spend the time.
Sure.
Don't neglect that because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable, but it's worth it. It's
And
well
it's
worth
uncharted water for a lot of pastors.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you so much for being here. What an
absolutely.
incredible! I mean, we still have a million more questions, George and myself, to go through. Maybe we have to call you back for another episode.
Yes.
But a lot of people are gonna again have more questions. They gonna want your experience, your pastoral advice, your medical advice. Where can people reach out to you to get contact with you so they can?
So
get some help?
I have it's called Integrity Medical or telehealth. I'm gonna
We're gonna put the link in the description.
Okay, awesome. So look at the link integritytelehealth.net. And the reason we started this online, we can do telehealth. So if you live anywhere in Florida, if you live in Texas, those are 2 states that we're focusing on right now. You can go on there. You can read all you want to read. There's a lot of information there, but more importantly, we have appointments that you can schedule an appointment and reach out to us, and we'll reach out to you, and we can answer whatever questions. We can schedule a visit with you. We can take care of you. We're for the purposes of this website, for the purposes of this service, we're not dealing with insurances. We're not taking insurances, but the prices are extremely reasonable because we want to provide that service not only to the church, but also to church families and people that you may know that could come to the website, schedule an appointment. If you schedule an appointment with a psychiatrist in your area right now, you'll probably be put out 2 or 3 months just because everybody's so busy, everybody's so tied up. And then if you were to pay out of pocket, it would be extremely expensive, and your insurance may or may not approve it. But in this website, you can be seen within the next week. We can take care of you. We can treat you. We can give you guidance. We can point the way, and help you out in any which way we can. We also have for family medicine, general medicine, for women that are pregnant, for children, pediatric care, whatever. We have that service available also at the website. So come to the website, schedule an appointment, and we'll be happy to meet with you.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is medical treatment, right? If you want to
Yes.
get pastoral advice, which he also offers, you're free to come to Spring Life Fellowship in
Absolutely.
Miami and talk to him and get
Yes.
some spiritual insight. But thank you so much for coming to the
Absolutely.
podcast.
Thank
you
sir.
so much for listening. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, feel free to subscribe, like, do all that good stuff, because a lot more of this stuff coming, and we're gonna have him back on the
Yes.
episode. So God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the What is a Man podcast. We want to personally invite men of all ages to join our What is a Man Christian men's group meeting every Monday night at 8 p.m. starting September 1st, 2025. Over 100 men gather weekly, no matter the background, the age, or church affiliation, to grow in faith, character, and brotherhood. Location can be found in the description below, and for those unable to make it in person, you can catch the live stream on the What is a Man YouTube account. And if you haven't already, get your hands on the life-changing book, What is a Man by Joaquin G. Molina, available now at Amazon and at whatisaman.com.